I'm Alvina, a 34-year-old stay-at-home mom. My family consists of my husband, Morris, our 2 daughters who are in elementary school, and we live with my in-laws on the same property, so we are a household of 6. Before I got married, I worked night shifts, but Morris suggested that I quit my job if it meant we could spend more time together, so I decided to stay at home instead. I spent my time raising our kids, and later worked part-time when things were more manageable. I wasn't sure about living with my in-laws at first. I didn't know them well, and I thought it might be stressful for a daughter-in-law to live with her in-laws. So, I was relieved when Morris promised me before we got married that we wouldn't have to live with his parents. However, after we got married, Morris brought it up again. He said he was worried about his parents and suggested we live on the same property, but not in the same house. I was surprised and protested, but Morris asked, "Do you dislike my parents that much? If our situations were reversed, would you want to live with your parents?" I couldn't argue with that, since my parents were still healthy and living with my brother. Even though I wasn't sure about it, Morris told me that his parents had already started building a house on our property, and we couldn't say no, so we ended up living together. But I made one condition: we wouldn't interfere in each other's lives. This is how our shared living situation began. My in-laws agreed to this, and we lived separate lives. I would join them for meals once or twice a week. The house they built on our property was nice, and I even thought it might be a good thing for us, since we could inherit it one day. However, I made a big mistake in thinking everything would be fine. Over time, my mother-in-law started breaking our agreement. At first, she would visit me once or twice a week for help with small things like carrying something because her back hurt, or preparing dinner because she wasn't feeling well. But soon, she began to expect more. She would ask, "Is breakfast ready?" Or "Why hasn't our part of the house been cleaned?" As if I was responsible for all the housework. Eventually, I ended up cooking all 3 meals and cleaning both houses. Morris didn't say anything about it. Only my father-in-law would apologize sometimes and offer me a snack, saying, "I know it's not much, but please have this." My mother-in-law didn't just interfere with housework. She also started to have strong opinions about how we raised our children. She would say things like, "Your girls should be taking these lessons," or "Why don't your daughters help with housework? What did you have 2 girls for?" Every time she said these things, my father-in-law would defend me, reminding her that we had agreed not to interfere in each other's lives. She would apologize, saying she felt weak and unwell, but after a while, the complaints would start again. When I tried to talk to Morris about it, he would tell me, "We're family. You need to be flexible when things get tough. It's your fault for not handling it better." I felt frustrated every day. Then, one day, my mother-in-law collapsed at home. We called an ambulance, but she passed away suddenly from a seizure. I felt a mix of sadness and relief, as the constant stress from her interference was finally over. Even though she had broken the agreement, my father-in-law had always been kind to me. I tried to take care of him, and he often thanked me, saying he was sorry for not sticking to the agreement and that he couldn't handle housework on his own. My daughters loved their gentle grandfather, and we had some peaceful days together. But a few months later, father-in-law collapsed too. He survived, but became bedridden and needed constant care. When we discussed his care, he said he didn't want to be a burden and mentioned going to a nursing home. But Morris stepped in and said, "Families should care for each other. Nursing homes are for when it's absolutely necessary. Alvina said she's okay with taking care of you." This completely surprised me. I did love my father-in-law and wanted to help him, but caring for him full-time at home was a big challenge. I had young kids to take care of and, clearly, Morris wouldn't help. I didn't want to say I couldn't do it in front of him, so I agreed. Caring for him turned out to be very hard. I had to help him with meals, bathroom visits, and bathing. He was a strong elderly man, and it was awkward sometimes because we were of the opposite sex. Each day, I had to prepare breakfast, help the kids with school, do housework, care for the kids after school, and then prepare dinner, all while caring for father-in-law. Every night, I would feel overwhelmed. Every day, I somehow managed to get through it all, but by the end of the day, I was completely exhausted and would collapse into bed. Morris, instead of helping with his father's care, started spending even less time at home. He claimed he had work, often saying he was working overnight, and would only come home 2 or 3 times a week. Because I never knew when he'd come back, I struggled to prepare dinner on time. When I was too tired to cook anything elaborate, I would make something simple, but Morris would get angry. He'd complain, "I'm working so hard, and this is all I get?" When I asked for help with housework or caring for his father, he would respond, "You're a full-time homemaker. Caring for my father is your job. This went on for 3 years, and it made me feel miserable every day. Over time, my daughters grew older and started helping around the house and with their grandfather. Chantal helped with cooking and cleaning, and Janie would gently wipe her grandfather's back, asking him if it felt good. I was really grateful to have such kind daughters. One day, Morris left his phone at home when he went to work. Despite knowing better, I couldn't resist the temptation to look through it. His password was his birthday, so I could easily unlock it. What I found shocked me. It turned out that Morris had been having an affair since I started taking care of his father, and they even had a child together. The messages on his phone showed that he was financially supporting his mistress, although he had given me money for living expenses, and said he was saving for our children's future. He hadn't saved anything. The messages got worse, with him saying things like, "My kids are old enough now, so they're not cute anymore," and, "Taking care of the old man is a pain, but at least I've got my idle wife to do it." Putting him in a care facility would cost money, but having my wife do it is free. Gotta use free labor, right? I was furious and couldn't stay calm. Normally, I would have kept quiet and waited for more evidence, but I couldn't hold it in. As soon as Morris got out of the bath, I shoved his phone in his face and demanded, "What is this about?" At first, he seemed surprised, but quickly regained his composure. Then he said something that shocked me even more. "You've lost your femininity since we had our kids. You don't wear makeup anymore. Your clothes are all about comfort now, and you fall asleep with your mouth open." Morris's cruel words kept hurting me. He told me, "Ever since you started caring for my father, you've lost even more of your femininity. You're not even a middle-aged woman anymore, you're like a middle-aged man." His words were painful, but he didn't stop there. He went on to say, "My girlfriend always wears makeup and takes care of herself, even after having a child. I don't plan on divorcing you, but my love is for her and our child. Once my father is gone and the kids are adults, I plan to kick you out and live with her." He continued to say things that made me feel worthless. While he showed some concern for the kids, it was clear he didn't care about me at all. I couldn't hold back my tears. I tried to dress up and put on makeup, but it was hard. I was handling childcare and housework all on my own, and I had to do everything quickly, even if it meant my hair was messy. I asked him, "If you wanted me to look beautiful, why didn't you help with the housework or caring for the kids and your father?" But Morris was unkind in his reply. "Look at other women. They stay beautiful while raising their kids. You're just not efficient. As a stay-at-home mom, you have no right to argue with me. I'm the one putting food on the table. If you have a complaint, you can divorce me." He added coldly, "For a woman your age, job opportunities are limited. Do you really think you can raise our 2 kids on alimony and compensation from me?" I felt crushed and couldn't respond. I wanted to think about the children, and I couldn't bring myself to divorce him. But Morris said, "You can't, can you? If you care about the kids, you'll take care of my father until the end. After that, you'll work as my housekeeper. Don't worry, when the kids grow up, they'll help you, so you'd better treat them well." Then, he went to his room with a satisfied smirk on his face. I was stunned and didn't know what to do. Eventually, I regained my composure and went to take care of my father-in-law. I tried to act like everything was fine, but it must have been clear something was wrong. He asked me, "Is something wrong?" I tried to brush it off, but I couldn't hold back my tears and ended up telling him everything. After listening to me, father-in-law said, "Alvina, I have something for you. Can you come back in a few hours?" I did as he asked, and when I returned, he gave me a piece of paper with someone's contact information on it. He said, "Contact this person. They know everything. I should be the one to act, but with my condition." And he smiled. A few days later, Morris told me, "I'll be on a business trip for a week. I guess it's better for you too if we call it a business trip, right? I'll enjoy the sightseeing." I decided to take action while Morris was away on his week-long business trip. A week later, when he came home, he was furious and panicked. Everything was gone. I calmly asked him, "How was your week-long affair trip? Did you enjoy it?" Morris shouted, demanding to know what was going on. I explained to him that the contact my father-in-law had given me was for a man named Mr. Corey, an old friend of his who was a large landowner. Mr. Corey had always wanted the land where my in-laws' house stood and had been trying to buy it for a long time. My father-in-law had always refused, saying he planned to leave it to his son, Morris, but after seeing how Morris was acting, my father-in-law decided it was best to sell. Before Morris left, I had already spoken to Mr. Corey and we arranged to sell the house and land for a price much higher than the market rate. My father-in-law even asked Mr. Corey to demolish the house during the week Morris was gone. When Morris returned, all he found was an empty lot. We planned to build a new house using the money from the land sale. When Morris heard this, he tried to convince me to rely on him, saying, "You're jobless, right? Even if your father builds a house, you can't expect to live comfortably without my income." But I told him, "Don't worry about me. I got a job offer from a company run by an acquaintance." Then I turned the tables and asked, "Morris, shouldn't you be worrying about yourself instead?" When he asked what I meant, I explained that his job was only secure because his father was friends with the company president. But now that my father-in-law had cut ties with him, I told him, "The president said you could be fired because of your poor work and your affair." Morris tried to excuse himself, saying, "I didn't mean it. I was just angry. I wasn't really going to leave you. We're family. Let's work things out." But I firmly told him, "My family now is my daughters and my father-in-law. Goodbye." Then I hung up on him. Morris called several times after that, but I ignored him. Later, my divorce from Morris was finalized. I claimed compensation from both Morris and his mistress, as I had plenty of evidence of his affair. Through various sources, including the president of his company, I found out that Morris had been embezzling company funds to support his double life. Morris not only lost his job but was also being sued for damages. He tried to move in with his mistress, but she dumped him when she realized he had no money left. Now, Morris is struggling to find a new job while working multiple part-time jobs to pay off his debts and child support. As for me, I plan to live with my daughters and my father-in-law in a rented house until we can move into the new house my father-in-law is building for us. When my father-in-law offered to build the house, he said he wanted to move into a care facility, and that he wanted us to live happily there. I told him, "What are you talking about, Dad? We're family. It would make the girls sad. Let's live together." My daughters also took his hand and said, "We want to live with Grandpa." My father-in-law, with tears in his eyes, thanked us. Although it's tough to work and take care of him, my daughters help out. So, we are now living together as a family of 4 with the help of home assistance and day services. We're looking forward to moving into our new home as a family.
Oh wow, I've got a good one for you today. You all asked for it, so here it is, a 9-part story with every update I could find. It's all about a mother-in-law who might just be the wildest we've ever talked about on this channel. We're calling it Mother-in-Law in the Wild, the Wedding Cake Saga. Let's dive in. So, I work part-time at a bakery. We have 4 employees who specialize in designing wedding cakes. Part of my job is meeting with customers, showing them our list of flavors, and sharing photos of wedding cakes we've made before. This helps them decide on a cake design that's just right for them. This morning, I had a couple scheduled to come in at 8:30. But to my surprise, they showed up at 7:45, and they brought an older woman with them. It was a bit annoying because we were already busy with the morning rush, but my boss asked me to take care of them anyway. So, I go over, introduce myself to the couple, congratulate them, and go through my usual talk. I show them our flavors, point out popular options, and share photos of some cakes we've done before. The bride-to-be takes the book and holds it so only she and her fiancé can see. The older woman sighs and steps outside for a smoke. The couple is really sweet and quickly picks out 5 designs they like. About 20 minutes later, the older woman comes back and asks what she missed. The fiancé shows her the designs they chose, and she immediately starts complaining. "No, that's too detailed. No, that one's too plain. That's not big enough. That's too big," and so on. It felt like I was listening to a grumpy version of Goldilocks. I glance over at this woman and ask the bride how many guests they're having. She tells me a number, but the mother-in-law jumps in with a number twice as large. The bride repeats her original number and explains that they're having a small wedding. The mother-in-law starts whining, saying she's already invited people and can't uninvite them now because that would be rude. The bride just shrugs. Then the mother-in-law turns to me and insists on the larger number. I tell her, "Sorry, the bride has the final say." At that, the mother-in-law huffs, "Well, why did I even bother coming if no one's going to listen?" The daughter-in-law says, "I don't know why you insisted on coming." The mother-in-law replies, "My son's getting married. I have every right to be here." The daughter-in-law calmly says, He's marrying me. You can come to the planning sessions, but I don't need your input. If I want it, I'll ask." Mother-in-law opens her mouth to argue, then just says, "Ugh, I need a cigarette," and goes outside to smoke. I look at the daughter-in-law, honestly amazed by how she stood her ground. The daughter-in-law then turns to her fiancé, who's been staring at the floor in total silence, looking like he wants to disappear. She glares at him and says, "I told you this would happen." He mumbles, "What am I supposed to do? Control your mother or I will," she snaps. The future husband sighs, clearly dreading it, but heads outside to deal with his mom like he's walking into battle. The daughter-in-law turns back to me, apologizes for the scene, and asks about scheduling a cake tasting and meeting with the designer. I set up the appointments for her and mention that we can set a password so no one can make changes to the date or cake without her permission. She likes the idea and asks me to make sure the password isn't shared with her fiancé, then leaves. I'm both impressed by her confidence and a bit sad that she feels she needs a password to keep her future mother-in-law from meddling. Hey everyone, it's Mr. Revenge Online here. Hope you're having an awesome day. Get ready because there are some wild updates on the way. I've got every single detail from OP, so buckle up, grab some candy, and let's dive into the first update. Alright, here's the background. The mother-in-law has a very noticeable accent that's rare in my area, while the bride and groom don't have accents at all. This will matter in a moment. So, I was cleaning my station when the phone rang. My coworker answered, saying it was about a wedding cake. Even though I was exhausted and ready to head home, I had to handle it since I was the only one working on wedding cakes that week. "Hello, this is the bakery," a Joyce speaking. "How can I help you?" "Oh yes, hello," said the caller. "I was there this weekend with my fiancé and future mother-in-law looking at wedding cakes and making appointments. I have a few changes I want to make." Wait a second, I recognize that accent. No way, I thought. No ducking way. Out loud I said, "Sure thing. Can I have your name and info?" "Oh, my name is underscore, and I need to change the cake servings. I need double the original amount, and I can't remember my appointment time with the design team, so I'll need that too," she says. "Oh, not a problem. I just need your passcode to make any changes to the cake order and release your appointment details." "Passcode? Oh, I forgot it. Just tell me." "I'm really sorry, ma'am, but I can't do that. We take privacy seriously. Our hours are listed, and you're welcome to stop by any time to update your cake order or reset your passcode. Just bring your ID when you come in." Well, this was very unhelpful. Goodbye. I apologized again and wished her a good night. Then, I left a note on the daughter-in-law's appointment file about the call and flagged it so we'd know to check the passcode and ID next time. I also left a note for my manager about it, suspecting the mother-in-law might stir things up again with her son and daughter-in-law. Edit. If it were up to me, I'd let the daughter-in-law know about this call immediately, but I have to get my manager's permission first. After all, I don't want to get fired. Alright, everyone, that wraps up update number 1. Update number 2 happened just a day later. If you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that button. Mr. Revenge Online has one channel, each with daily videos, and the newest one, Mr. Revenge Online Office Dramas, has all the latest updates. You'll find links in the description below. Now, let's jump into update number 2. Update 2. Our protocol says that if any change requests can't be processed, we should follow up within 20 hours. My manager asked me to handle this one since I initially helped with the appointment. So, I called the daughter-in-law and left a brief message for her to call back. She returned my call within an hour and asked to speak with me directly. "Hello, this is the bakery. Joyce speaking. How can I help you?" "Oh, hi. I got a message asking me to call back," she said. "Yes, ma'am, I was just following up on your request yesterday about changing the cake order. I'm very sorry I couldn't help you with it because I understand you forgot the passcode. Would you like to come in to update it? You'll just need to bring an ID. Wait, what changes? What are you talking about? I never called you." "Well, we received a call yesterday around this time asking for your next appointment date and a change to the cake size." "I never called you. I have my passcode here. Here it is. Was anything changed?" "Oh, no, ma'am, that's the correct passcode. Nothing was changed. What would you like to update?" No, hold on. Are you sure someone called about the cake?" "Yes, ma'am. Someone called with your information, but they didn't have your passcode." I promise, no details were changed or shared. Nothing will happen without the passcode and permission. I think I know who did this. Could you please note that I won't be making any changes over the phone? I want my passcode to stay the same, and from now on, I'll handle everything in person. No problem at all. I'll make a note on your account. Is there anything else I can help with? No, thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks for letting me know. Have a good night. I told my manager about the call, and she flagged the account as high priority and sent out a memo reminding everyone about the passcode policy. She actually loves drama, so I think part of her is hoping the mother-in-law tries something again. Update number 3, 5 days later. So, here's what happened next. We're short-staffed because 2 bakers called out last minute, and we're swamped with huge orders. Because of this, I've been working in the back the whole day and haven't answered the phone at all. It's just me, 3 counter girls, and the bakers, and our manager isn't coming in until later in the afternoon. I'm going back and forth, dropping off pastries, when I hear a very familiar accent talking loudly up front. My heart sinks. Today is not the day for this drama. The oven is beeping, so I have to keep moving, and I can't stop to listen in. Suddenly, one of the counter girls, who I'll call CG, calls for me. Her voice is shaky, and I should mention she's only 18. She explains what's happening. The mother-in-law came in and asked to change a wedding cake order. CG, trying to help, notices the flag on the account and asks for ID. The mother-in-law says she forgot her ID and tells CG to make the change anyway. When CG explains she can't, the mother-in-law starts raising her voice and demands to speak to a manager. CG tells her that the manager won't be in until later. That's not good enough for the mother-in-law. She turns to the other customers in the shop and loudly complains about useless teenagers and how unprofessional our bakery is. CG, trying to keep things calm, politely asks her not to disturb the other customers and even offers her a free coffee and pastry as an apology. But the mother-in-law snaps back, calling CG a stupid brat. That's when CG excuses herself and comes to find me. Alright, everyone, I was pretty mad because we were way too busy for this, and people who are rude to employees, especially a young one, are just the worst. You don't talk to employees like that, especially not to a kid. So, I told the counter girl to take a deep breath, call our manager, and go on a break while I took care of the mother-in-law. Quick side note, I'm not great with confrontations, but I can still be professional even when I'm upset. Here's how the conversation went down. Oh, hello again. My name's Joyce. I hear you're having some issues with your order. How can I help? The mother-in-law starts complaining about needing to show ID, about the unhelpful phone girl, about disrespectful brats, and finally mentions she wants to make changes to the wedding cake. Ma'am, I'm sorry for any inconvenience, I say. But there's no need to speak about our teenage employee like that. Let me see what I can do. I said this a bit louder than usual, just enough for the other customers nearby to hear. The mother-in-law just grunts and says, just fix it. So, still in a clear, loud voice, I say, alright, I see the issue. Your order is flagged, and I can't make any changes without the proper ID or passcode. If you can provide either one, I'd be happy to help. Now she starts yelling, saying, I don't have an ID. I forgot my passcode. You're being very unhelpful. Okay, ma'am, there's no need to yell, I say calmly. I understand this is frustrating. But since you set the passcode, I'm sure you understand why we need it to protect your privacy. If you have your ID, I can help you reset the passcode. We want to make sure nothing is changed on your wedding cake without your direct approval. She looked furious but also embarrassed and finally said she'd be back later. I told her our manager would be in later if she wanted to talk to them directly. I watched her go to her car, where she made a few phone calls. When the counter girl came back from her break, I told her to let me know if the mother-in-law came back in. So far, she hasn't returned, and her car is gone. My lunch break is nearly over, and our manager should arrive soon, so I'll keep you posted if anything new happens. Update number 4. The next day. I've seen a lot of comments asking why I went along with the mother-in-law instead of calling her out. Here's why. 1. We have a protocol for situations like this. This is the first time I've personally dealt with it, but it's not the first time someone has tried to change an order they didn't place. Following protocol keeps me safe at my job, and I actually like my job. 2. Calling her out might just make her try again, but this time with someone who doesn't know her situation. She had already been rude to a teenager, and I didn't want anyone else to go through that. I'd rather let her dig her own hole. 3. I was also worried she'd cause a scene. It may be a small bakery, but I'm proud of my job, and I won't let one rude person ruin things for the other customers. Now, on to the update. My manager came in shortly after my lunch break. She told me to call the daughter-in-law, and not long after, the mother-in-law showed up. My manager took her into her office, and I called the daughter-in-law to explain what was going on. She asked directly if I recognized the mother-in-law's voice, and I answered honestly. She then asked what time my manager and I would be off work and said she'd be coming in. The mother-in-law was still in the office with my manager when the daughter-in-law arrived with her fiancé. The fiancé looked furious, and the daughter-in-law looked close to tears, so I got them some hot chocolate and donuts before letting my manager know they were here. My manager asked me to bring them back, along with the counter girl who had dealt with the mother-in-law earlier. The counter girl walked in first, followed by me, the daughter-in-law, and her fiancé. The mother-in-law looked smug, until her son walked in, and her face went ghost white. "Mom," he said, "what are you doing here?" The mother-in-law started talking in a different language. "Mom," he interrupted, "speak English. Daughter-in-law doesn't understand that language, and you know it. That's rude. Now, what are you doing here?" "I was just asking about the cake," she replied. "And these girls were so unhelpful. You should go to a different bakery. This place is terrible." The manager replied, "Actually, Joyce and the counter girl were following the rules. We explained that no changes could be made without a passcode or ID, and you refused to provide either." The daughter-in-law chimed in, "I knew you'd try to change the cake. We've told you over and over that we want a small wedding." The mother-in-law snapped, "Well, you want the small wedding. My son wants a big celebration." No, I don't, Mom," he said. "We agreed on a small wedding because it's what we both want. And don't talk to me like that. I deserve respect too." My manager gently interrupted, "I'm sorry, but this isn't the place for this discussion. Daughter-in-law, fiancé, here is the information you gave us for the cake size and design. Can you confirm it's correct?" They both nodded, "Yes." "Alright, very good. Daughter-in-law, your name is on the deposit, so I want to assure you again that no changes will be made without your ID. And I'm sorry, but we won't be using the passcode anymore." The mother-in-law muttered something in her language, and the son quickly told her to stop. She looked teary-eyed. The daughter-in-law thanked us, "Thank you so much, and sorry for all the trouble." "Oh, it's no trouble at all," I replied. "I also need to let you know that the mother-in-law is no longer allowed to join any of your future appointments because of how she treated our employees. She's no longer welcome here." The mother-in-law sniffled. "Oh, that's fine," she said. "Stop it, Mom," her son said firmly. "You raised me to know better, so I know you know better too." The mother-in-law muttered something in another language, but her son told her, in English, that she owed us an apology. She mumbled something else in her language, gathered her things, and left without another word. The daughter-in-law still looked close to tears, and her fiancé hugged her, apologizing for doubting her. My manager asked if they needed a moment, but they said no and apologized again for the mother-in-law's behavior. The counter girl and I were told to get back to work. In the end, the couple seemed okay when they left, and the owner approved a 10% discount on their cake to make up for the trouble. The mother-in-law is now banned from the bakery. If she shows up, we're supposed to ask her to leave and call my manager if she's around or the police if she's not. Update number 5. A few days later. I work weekends during the day at the bakery, but my shifts vary throughout the week depending on my other job schedule and what needs doing. Sometimes, I work up front with customers, other times I handle appointments for weddings and special events, and sometimes I just bake. Since we've been a bit short-staffed, I've been working from 2 a.m. to 7 a.m., cleaning, doing prep work, organizing, baking, and so on. When I work those early hours, I keep the front lights off and the doors locked. I even park on a well-lit street for safety, and since our kitchen is off to the side, the lights aren't visible unless you're right at the front door. Basically, the bakery looks empty during those hours. It's usually pretty quiet until about 7 a.m. when the breakfast crowd starts arriving. So, when the phone rang at 3 a.m., I ignored it. My manager and coworkers have my number, and we usually text if there's anything urgent. My job at that time is just to prep for the morning, and we have a great answering machine. But then the phone rang again at 3:05, then at 3:10, then at 3:15, then again at 3:20. I was elbow deep in dough and getting frustrated with the constant ringing. When it rang again at 4 a.m., I gave in and answered. "Good morning, this is the bakery. Joyce speaking. How can I help you?" Finally, a familiar voice answered. "It's about time. I've been calling for over an hour. Why haven't you answered?" "Never mind that. I need to speak to someone in charge immediately." At this point, my inner voice is like, ugh, that accent, but I tried not to jump to conclusions, thinking maybe it was someone else with a similar accent. I told her, "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we're actually closed right now." "No, you're not. Don't lie to me. You're not closed." "I apologize, ma'am, but we are. Our hours are from X to Y and someone will be available to help you then." "That's not good enough. The people who work then are terrible, unprofessional, and rude. I need you to help me now. I need information on daughter-in-law's name, cake." In my head, I'm thinking, oh wow. "Ma'am, we're closed, and I can't help you with anything right now. If you'd like assistance, please call back during our hours." "No. I need help now." "You're lying. I know you're open. Open that door. I can see the lights on." Now, here's the thing. I've been really anxious lately, and the only way she could see the kitchen light is if she was right up against our front door with her face pressed to the glass. I panicked, freaked out, and hung up on her, immediately having a full-blown panic attack over the sourdough. The phone rang twice more while I was trying to calm down, but then finally went quiet. I texted my manager and a male coworker who'd be helping with the opening. My coworker texted back with a few emojis and a WTF. My manager called me, saying she was on her way and told me to stay inside. When my manager arrived about 20 minutes later, there was no one outside, but we found around 22 cigarette butts by the front door. I'd swept the entrance before starting, so we realized the mother-in-law had likely been standing outside for quite a while. My manager decided that from now on, no one could open or prep alone. We'd need at least 3 people on each shift. She also left messages for the owner and the daughter-in-law explaining what happened, though I ended my shift before I heard back from either. Update number 6, 4 days later. After the mother-in-law scared me half to death by lurking outside the bakery in the dark, the owner had finally had enough. She called the couple, explained what had happened, and told them that if the mother-in-law showed up again, she'd call the police. The owner told the couple that if the mother-in-law showed up again, she'd call the police. She also said she'd understand if they wanted to switch bakeries and offered to refund their deposit. However, she wouldn't tolerate her employees being harassed or scared. The daughter-in-law apologized for her mother-in-law's actions and promised there would be a conversation about her behavior. She reassured the owner that they didn't want to switch bakeries because she and her fiancé were both impressed with the professionalism and care around their cake. They also fully supported the owner's decision to call the police if necessary. Apparently, the future husband seemed a bit hesitant at first, but he agreed when the owner offered to refund the deposit again. So, that should be the end of it, right? The happy couple talks to the mother-in-law, she understands where she crossed the line, and everything's fine. Yeah, no, of course not. This is far from over. Since the mother-in-law learned that showing up won't get her anywhere and she could face the police if she comes back, she's resorted to calling us constantly. When she calls to make changes, our new line is, "I'm sorry, but we no longer make changes of this type over the phone. Please come in during our business hours if you need assistance." But this doesn't stop her. She keeps calling and the conversation always goes the same way. She gives us the daughter-in-law's name and asks about the next appointment or demands a change. We tell her we can't give out that information, repeat the line about needing to come in, and she insists on speaking to someone in charge. We put her on hold until she eventually hangs up and calls back later, trying the same thing. All of this over a cake. I'm planning to update on the tasting and design appointment once I have some time. Oh, and my manager gave me the green light to share with the daughter-in-law what I'd written about the situation. I wrote the info on a card as suggested by some readers, and gave it to her along with an explanation. I offered to delete the posts if she found it upsetting, but she actually loved it and thought it was hilarious. She said she mainly uses Tumblr and Pinterest, but she might check it out. So, hello if you're reading this. Update number 7, 3 days later. The daughter-in-law and her fiancé had their cake tasting and design appointment over the weekend. Right in the middle of it, the mother-in-law called, and the future husband let the daughter-in-law handle it. She ended up in tears from frustration, and I did my best to comfort her. When I told her about this thread, she was really amused that I'd been writing about her and her nightmare of a mother-in-law. She said her friends couldn't believe anyone could actually be this crazy. I gave her the link and told her, "We believe you, we're your people." She laughed and said she mostly uses Tumblr and Pinterest but might browse this as well. She even gave me permission to keep writing about it and share more details. So, here's a bit about their wedding. They're planning an Alice in Wonderland-themed tea party. The ceremony and reception will be held at a small park. However, the mother-in-law is pushing hard for it to be held at her church, and she's even paid a deposit on a hall for the reception. She wants a religious ceremony and has invited family and church friends that the couple doesn't even know. The cake they chose is super fun and unique. They're going with a colorful design decorated with scenes from Alice in Wonderland, and the toppers will be the Mad Hatter and Queen of Hearts. I've seen the toppers and they're adorable. Their guest list is just 50 people, so they ordered a cake that serves 60. Meanwhile, the mother-in-law keeps trying to change their cake order to a classic 3-tiered, all-white design. She doesn't know the final cake design, so she keeps calling, saying we should forget what was said and follow her instructions. She insists the cake should be plain white with edible beading and serve at least 250 people. That's right, 250. The couple's guest list is only 50 people, but the mother-in-law has added a whopping 200 extra guests. While I was trying to comfort her, the daughter-in-law told me her mother-in-law has gone overboard ever since they got engaged. She was always traditional and stuffy, but now she's acting completely irrational. She leaves messages constantly and even shows up at their house uninvited. The future husband keeps waffling because he feels stuck between 3 important women. He even suggested that the daughter-in-law let his mom plan more of the wedding, saying, "Mom never got the wedding she wanted." I gently reminded her that this is her wedding, not her mother-in-law's, which made her laugh. Apparently, she told her fiancé that if he wanted to give his mom the wedding of her dreams, he could go ahead and marry her instead. She's getting really frustrated with both of them at this point. The designer working on the cake laughed and said his boyfriend was a bit of a mama's boy but eventually changed, so he understands what she's going through. I shared that I also had a difficult mother-in-law in my past. She said her fiancé is slowly learning to say no to his mom, and she really appreciates the effort. We're doing everything to keep that cake safe. The future husband came back looking angry, and the drama finally ended. We got back to choosing details and flavors, and by the end of the appointment, the daughter-in-law hugged both of us. I quietly reassured her that her cake would be protected. Before they left, the daughter-in-law and I exchanged numbers, and we've texted a bit since then. Apparently, the fiancé is slowly growing a backbone, but the mother-in-law isn't happy about it. Here's a little extra info before update 8. The mother-in-law has been playing this annoying game, calling constantly to try to change the cake or get appointment details. She even tried to add 10 loaves of sourdough to the order. What on earth, lady? Quick update. The mother-in-law has officially been uninvited from the wedding. The daughter-in-law told her fiancé that if his mom is coming, she won't be. He agreed. Now, the daughter-in-law is hiring security to check IDs at the wedding and to accompany the cake during delivery. She paid for this herself and specified that only she, not her fiancé, can make any changes to the approval list. Alright, everyone, Mr. Revenge Online here. Things are getting really intense, and update 8 is coming up right now. Let me just say, this one's wild. If you haven't subscribed yet, check the description for all the links. Now, here's update 8. 6 days later. This week has been rough. I lost one of my other jobs, had a total breakdown, and for some reason, my neighbor has started frying fish in the hallway, making my whole apartment smell like fish. I'm broke, exhausted, out of Nutella, and PMing. Basically, I've reached my limit. So, when this cake-obsessed mother-in-law called again, I was completely out of patience. Around 4 a.m. today, she called, and since my coworker was busy, I answered. We went through the same routine we've been dealing with all week. She hung up, but by 9:15 she was calling again, so I picked up. Then, around 11 a.m., we had this conversation. Good morning, this is the bakery. Joyce speaking. How can I? Oh, you again. Why are you always answering the phone? I don't know, ma'am, I work here, I replied, even though I was so tired I briefly wondered if I was in the right job. Get me someone else. I want to speak to someone in charge. I'm sorry, my manager isn't here, but I can have her call if... Shut up. I don't want to talk to you, lady. A little later, while I was helping a customer, I noticed my teenage coworker getting upset on the phone. She's only 18, new to working at the counter, and this is her first job, so she hasn't yet been worn down by the rough side of retail work. I figured my coworker was dealing with a tough customer, so I signaled to her that I could take the call if she wanted. She shook her head and hung up. A little while later, though, I heard her on the phone again, sounding upset, so I paused to listen. She kept apologizing and saying there was nothing she could do. Then I could actually hear shouting through the phone from several feet away, and our coffee machines were running, so it was really loud. The poor girl looked close to tears, so I took the phone from her to handle it myself. Who was it? Crazy mother-in-law Karen, of course. You girls are so unprofessional. You young people are awful, too busy with your boyfriends or playing on computers to know how to give decent customer service. Are you going to help me, or should I take my business elsewhere? Oh, ma'am, I think it would actually be best if you did take your business elsewhere. What did you just say? Who's this? Where's the other girl? I said I think it's best you take your business elsewhere. My name's Joyce. I'm the person you'll be dealing with from now on, unless you'd rather speak to my manager. Oh, I'm sure you want my business. Actually, no, I don't. Not particularly. What? Get me the other girl. You're a nasty, nasty woman. This is not how you treat people. I usually have a lot of patience, but I'd had it. I spoke firmly, stepping out of my usual politeness. Ma'am, I heard how you spoke to her, and you should be ashamed. She's 18 years old, and since you can't seem to be polite, it's best you deal with an adult from now on. From here on, you'll only be talking to me or the manager. She tried to argue, but I kept going. You've been told repeatedly that changes cannot be made over the phone. We have this policy specifically to avoid what you're trying to do. If you have any questions about the cake, I suggest you discuss it with your son and future daughter-in-law. It's their cake, not yours. You are not the customer, and you won't be allowed to make any changes to their order. Period. Now, is there anything else, completely unrelated to your son's wedding, that I can help you with? She was silent for a second, then hung up. I called my manager immediately and told her what happened. I thought I might get in trouble, but my manager was fine with it. She said she'd let the owner know and assured me not to worry. I also sent a quick text to the daughter-in-law as a heads up. We've become friendly since her tasting and design appointment. I told her I was sorry for snapping at her mother-in-law. At least now the mother-in-law knows we're aware she's been trying to change the cake again. I apologized in case there was any fallout, but she texted back, joking that she was sorry she missed the show and might even hire me as one of her security guards for the wedding. Thankfully, the mother-in-law didn't call back for the rest of my shift. Seriously though, this week has been exhausting. Update number 9. 5 days later. Alright, everyone, this is a big one. I'm posting this with the daughter-in-law's permission, so please don't message me about invading privacy. She knows I'm sharing this, and I even sent her a draft to review before posting. Well, here we go. The wedding has been called off. Since I last confronted the mother-in-law, she's only called 6 times that I know of. I answered twice, and she hung up both times. My coworkers, who took the other calls, just hung up as soon as they realized it was her. Finally, the bakery owner gave us permission to stop dealing with her nonsense and hang up right away. After the cake tasting, the daughter-in-law and I became fast friends. We bonded over our love for fairy tales and the shared experience of dealing with this outrageous mother-in-law. I kept her updated on any calls from her mother-in-law, and she vented to me about the ups and downs of wedding planning. A few days ago, she came into the bakery for coffee and looked upset, so I joined her on my lunch break. She told me her fiancé had been asking her not only to re-invite his mom to the wedding but also to let her be more involved in the planning. She asked for my advice, and I tried to answer without giving a one-sided opinion, given my own rough history with an ex and his difficult mother. Instead of telling her to run for the hills, I suggested she think about what she truly wanted in her relationship. I told her to consider what she was willing to sacrifice or compromise on to keep the relationship strong. She thanked me, said she'd think things over, and would talk to her fiancé soon. She promised to keep me updated. Then, just a little while ago, she called me in tears. She had broken off the engagement. She found out that her fiancé had been playing both sides, telling her he supported whatever she decided while telling his mother that he thought she was being too controlling and that he'd try to convince her to let his mom attend the wedding. This led to a big argument between them, and he accused her of not understanding how important family is to Greek women, saying he didn't want to get married if his mom couldn't attend. When she agreed that maybe marriage was a mistake, he tried to backtrack, saying he was just bluffing. But she stood her ground. Since everything is in her name, even their house, she's staying with her sister while he moves back in with his mom. The daughter-in-law is coming in tomorrow to make some changes to her cake order. She told me she's turning it into a freedom celebration cake. She's inviting all her friends she had to cut from the guest list to make room for his friends and family, and she invited me too. She's also increasing the cake size to fit her now larger, more casual party and as a small goodbye gift to her mother-in-law. Since the relationship is over, I'm pretty sure there won't be more updates. Sorry, drama lovers, but this is the end of the saga. I told you this story was wild. Let's check out some of the comments. One person says, "Can you imagine the drama if the bride had gotten pregnant? I'm so glad she got out. I can't even think about what her ex-mother-in-law would have done during her pregnancy, or worse, at the birth. She'd probably be right in the delivery room trying to take control." Another comment says, "Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I bet there will be another story someday about this mother-in-law." And a third person adds, "Well, at least they can ignore all the extra venues she rented for the wedding." So, is this one of the craziest mother-in-law stories we've ever had on the channel? I think it just might be. I'd love to hear what you all think, so drop your thoughts in the comments. That's the only story for today. Hope you all have an amazing day. Don't forget to check out our other channels in the description, and I'll see you later.
Hi, I'm Kate, a 27-year-old marketing professional. I've always dreamed of my perfect wedding since I was a little girl. But everything changed one day, the day my whole world turned upside down. Growing up, I was the responsible one in the family. My younger sister, Emma, was the golden child, the center of our parents' universe. It never really bothered me because we each had our roles to play, and I was fine with mine. But nothing could have prepared me for the betrayal that shattered my heart. It all started on a sunny afternoon. I remember walking into my parents' house, excited to finalize the last few details for my upcoming wedding. As soon as I stepped inside, a strange smell hit me, a mix of fresh paint and sawdust. Confused, I wandered into the kitchen. The kitchen, which had been old and outdated just a few weeks ago, now looked completely different. It was sparkling, modern, and looked like something from a home renovation show. "Mom? Dad? What's all this?" I asked, my voice echoing off the shiny new tiles. My mom turned to me with a big smile. "Oh, sweetie, isn't it amazing? We decided it was time Emma had a kitchen fit for a chef. You know how cramped the old one was." Emma chimed in, her voice full of excitement. "Yeah, Kate, check this out. There's so much space now. It's incredible." I felt a knot forming in my stomach. Something didn't feel right. I didn't want to ask the question on my mind, but before I could stop myself, the words slipped out. "Where did the money for this come from?" The room went quiet. My dad looked away awkwardly, clearing his throat. My mom's cheerful tone turned stiff as she replied, "Well, since Emma needed it more, we used your wedding fund." I froze, my heart sinking. "My wedding fund? The money you've been saving for me since I was born." My voice trembled as tears welled up in my eyes. My mom nodded, trying to justify it. Kate, it made sense. Emma's kitchen was so outdated, and this was important for her. We thought we'd help her out. You used it without even asking me? I interrupted, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. Emma's face fell. Kate, I didn't know. I thought they had extra money. I didn't think it would come from your wedding fund. Her words didn't matter. The damage was already done. I turned to my parents, looking for some sign of remorse, but all I saw was justification in their eyes. I couldn't hold back anymore. I see where your priorities are, I said, my voice cold and distant. Consider yourselves uninvited to the wedding. Kate, wait, my mom pleaded, stepping toward me. No, I snapped, sharper than I intended. If my dreams mean this little to you, then I don't want you there. You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine. Without waiting for another word, I turned and walked out of the house. Each step I took felt heavier than the last, as if my heart was breaking a little more with every move. By the time I got to my car, tears were streaming down my face. This was supposed to be one of the happiest times of my life. I had been planning my wedding for months, and now the people I thought would support me the most had crushed that dream without a second thought. I drove home, trying to process what had just happened. Memories of all the times I had been the responsible one flashed through my mind. I had always done everything I could to make my parents proud. I worked hard, saved money, and never caused trouble. Meanwhile, Emma, the golden child, always seemed to get everything handed to her. This time, though, it was too much. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the betrayal. They had taken something that was meant for me, something I had dreamed about my entire life, and given it away without even considering how it would affect me. As I sat alone in my apartment that evening, I realized something important. This wasn't just about the kitchen or the wedding fund. It was about how I had always been treated as second best. For years, I had accepted it, thinking that was just the way things were. But now, I saw things clearly. This was my time to stand up for myself, to put my own happiness first for once. It wouldn't be easy, but I knew I had to move forward without their support. In the end, the wedding would still happen, and it would still be beautiful. The people who truly cared about me would be there to celebrate, and that was all that mattered. This betrayal hurt more than I could put into words, but it also gave me strength. It taught me to value myself and my dreams, even when others didn't. And for that, I would forever be grateful. I reached my car, and tears rolled down my face like an unstoppable river. But with those tears came something else, a new determination. It was as solid and unshakable as the fancy granite countertops that had replaced my lifelong dream of a perfect wedding. My wedding would still happen, but it would be on my terms, smaller, simpler, and entirely mine. As for my family, they had made their choice, and now I was making mine. From this moment on, I would focus on building a life where I came first. The one day that was supposed to be all about me would truly reflect what I wanted. After canceling my parents' invitations, I thought the worst of the drama might be over. I was wrong. Adjusting my wedding plans felt bittersweet, but soon, rumors began to spread. I could only guess that my parents were proudly showing off Emma's shiny new kitchen to anyone who would listen. One afternoon, as I sipped coffee with my best friend, Sabrina, she leaned forward, her expression a mix of disbelief and frustration. "Kate, you're not going to believe this," she said. "Your parents actually said Emma's kitchen was a better investment than a wedding." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. So, apparently, my biggest milestone in life is less important than a fancy kitchen remodel, I said, sarcasm dripping from my words. Sabrina stared at me, her eyes wide with shock. "I mean, really? A kitchen is more important than your wedding? That's just ridiculous." Her reaction mirrored my own feelings. I thought I had already felt the worst of their betrayal, but somehow, hearing those words made it hurt even more. I clenched my hands around my coffee mug, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "They just don't get it," I said, my voice tight with anger. "But if they think they can brush this off without consequences, they're wrong. Cutting them out of my wedding isn't enough anymore." Sabrina nodded, her expression serious.
Good.
They need to realize what they've done. This isn't just about a kitchen, it's about how they've treated you.
I knew she was right.
They needed to understand the impact of their actions, and for that, I needed support from someone who truly understood what I was going through. That's when I decided to reach out to my Uncle Tony. Tony had distanced himself from the family years ago, frustrated with their shallow values and favoritism. Reconnecting with him felt like finding a lifeline. You know, Kate, he said one evening as we sat in his warm, book-filled study, I always knew your parents favored Emma. But this is on a whole other level. His voice was rough with disapproval, and I could see the frustration in his eyes as he spoke. Yeah, I replied, my own anger boiling over. And now they're parading it around town like it's something to be proud of. Tony shook his head, his jaw tight. They've made their priorities clear, Kate. Now it's your turn to do the same. His words struck a chord in me. I wasn't just planning a wedding anymore. I was taking control of my life. This wasn't just about one day. It was about standing up for myself and refusing to let their actions define me. And for the first time, I felt strong enough to do it. I couldn't let this go. The hurt and anger were too strong. As I sat with Uncle Tony, I voiced my frustration, unsure of how to move forward. Tony leaned in, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. What if we don't let it go? He said. What if we let everyone see them for who they really are? His idea was simple yet brilliant, a family reunion. It had been years since we'd had one, and Tony offered to host it at his place. The goal? To expose my parents' actions in front of the whole family. Planning the reunion gave me a sense of purpose. It was something to focus on besides my scaled-down wedding. Tony and I worked together, going through guest lists and contacting relatives we hadn't seen in years. The invitations hinted at a big surprise, sparking curiosity. When the day of the reunion arrived, I was a bundle of nerves. Tony's large backyard was buzzing with chatter as relatives greeted each other and caught up. I watched as my parents arrived, looking both confused and cautiously pleased by the attention. Once everyone had settled in, Tony clinked his glass, calling for silence. The murmur of conversations faded, and all eyes turned to him. Family, he began, his voice commanding and steady, we're here today to celebrate truth and transparency among us. I noticed my parents exchanging uneasy glances. They could sense that something was off. Tony continued, his tone growing more serious. And what better way to celebrate truth than by clearing up some misconceptions? He turned to me and gave a small nod. Taking a deep breath, I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. Many of you have probably heard about or even seen my sister Emma's beautiful new kitchen, I began, trying to steady my voice. What you might not know is how it was paid for. Whispers rippled through the crowd as I pulled out copies of bank statements and contractor bills. These documents show exactly where the money came from, I said, holding them up for everyone to see. The money set aside for my wedding, money saved for me since I was a child, was used without my permission to fund that kitchen remodel. A shocked silence fell over the crowd, broken only by murmurs of disbelief. My parents' faces turned a deep shade of red. Emma stared at her feet, clearly mortified. I continued, my voice shaking with emotion. My dream, my wedding, was deemed less important than a set of fancy appliances and granite countertops. Tony stepped forward then, his voice firm and commanding. We stand for fairness and support in this family. Today, we've seen an example of the opposite. Let's reflect on what this means for us as a family moving forward. The crowd buzzed with shock and indignation. Why would they do such a thing? An aunt called out, disbelief heavy in her tone. I answered, my words bitter but honest. In their eyes, it was about necessity, what they thought was more important. But in doing so, they overlooked fairness and respect for me. Emma, her face bright red with embarrassment, suddenly stood up. Kate, I didn't know, she said, her voice trembling. I had no idea the money came from your wedding fund. If I had known, I would never have let this happen. Her apology felt sincere, but it didn't erase the damage. I appreciated her words, but the betrayal wasn't just about her. It was about my parents and their decision to disregard my dreams without a second thought. As the reunion ended, the family's attitude toward my parents shifted. Their actions were now out in the open, and the truth couldn't be ignored. It wasn't the way I wanted things to unfold, but it gave me closure. I knew I couldn't change the past, but I could move forward, stronger and more determined than ever to prioritize my happiness and the life I wanted to build. I didn't know, Kate. I swear I didn't know they used your money, Emma said, her voice shaky, her eyes wide with guilt. It's not just about the money, Emma, I replied, unable to hide my frustration. It's about trust. It's about respect. Our intention was never to hurt anyone, Dad said defensively, stepping in. Emma needed help, and we made a tough call. A tough call. I couldn't hide the disbelief in my voice. What about my wedding? What about my dreams? The air grew tense as relatives shifted uncomfortably, clearly aware of the tension between us. Seems to me, an older cousin spoke up cautiously. You thought only of one daughter. What about Kate? Another relative chimed in, their tone sharper. How do you justify choosing between your children like that? The room erupted into a heated argument. Voices overlapped, family members taking sides. Some expressed sympathy toward me, while others tried to justify my parents' actions. It was a chaotic mix of emotions. Enough. Tony's voice cut through the noise like a knife. The room fell silent, his commanding presence demanding attention. This isn't just a family squabble over money, he said, his voice steady and firm. It's about priorities. Today, we've seen clearly where those priorities lie. For some of us, the crowd grew quiet, the tension so thick it felt hard to breathe. My parents, usually so confident, now looked small under the weight of the disapproving stares directed at them. The reunion, which had started as a cheerful family gathering, had turned somber and uncomfortable. Slowly, relatives began to leave, offering me sympathetic glances and brief words of support. I'm sorry, Kate, Emma muttered as she walked past me, unable to meet my eyes. Don't be, I said softly. It's not your fault. But it's clear now, I need to step away from them. The drive home was quiet. My earlier resolve to expose the truth now mixed with a deep sadness. It wasn't easy to face the reality of my parents' choices, but there was also a strange sense of relief. The truth was out, and with it came a chance to move forward. Not just with my wedding plans, but with my life. In the days following the reunion, the fallout was immediate. Whispers of betrayal spread quickly through the community. My parents, who had always been respected, now faced harsh judgment from neighbors and friends. Walking through town, I felt the weight of the community's whispers. At the grocery store, I overheard snippets of conversations. Did you hear about the Johnsons? Someone whispered. They took money from their daughter's wedding fund for a kitchen remodel. Yeah, another voice replied. And at the expense of their other daughter. Poor Kate. The judgment from others was a strange kind of comfort. Not joy, but validation that I wasn't overreacting. People saw what had happened for what it was, a betrayal. The looks my parents received in public were a stark contrast to the admiration they were used to. They couldn't ignore the consequences of their actions anymore, and it was clear they felt the weight of the community's disapproval. Despite everything, I felt a small sense of peace. The truth was no longer hidden, and I no longer had to carry the burden alone. My wedding would go on, smaller and simpler, but it would be a celebration of the people who truly cared for me. This painful experience taught me something important. I deserved to be surrounded by people who valued me and my happiness. It hurt to step away from my parents, but I realized that sometimes creating boundaries is the only way to protect yourself. With each passing day, I felt a little stronger. I had faced the betrayal, exposed the truth, and stood up for myself. It wasn't the wedding I had once dreamed of, but it was still my day, and it was still mine to cherish. In the end, I realized that this wasn't just about a kitchen or a wedding fund. It was about respect, love, and fairness, things I had a right to demand in my life. And from that point on, I vowed to never settle for less. Validation came slowly, but it arrived nonetheless. It felt good to know that the pain I had endured was seen, even if only by strangers. People now understood what I had gone through, and that recognition made me feel less alone. One chilly Thursday morning, as I browsed the local market, I spotted Emma. She approached me hesitantly, a wicker basket dangling awkwardly from her arm. Her nervousness was clear, but I wasn't sure I wanted to hear what she had to say. "Kate," she began softly. "Save it, Emma," I interrupted, my voice steady but firm. "I'm not in the mood." She paused, looking down for a moment before meeting my eyes again. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she said, her tone sincere. "I really didn't know." I shook my head, my emotions carefully guarded. "Whether you knew or not doesn't change what happened," I said flatly. "They chose you, Emma. They always choose you. And somehow I'm always the one paying the price." Her expression crumbled, hurt filling her eyes. In the past, I might have softened at that look, but not this time. I couldn't let myself go back to that place. "I need space, Emma," I said, my voice unwavering. "Space to heal and rebuild my life without the chaos our parents bring." She nodded slowly, taking a small step back. "I understand," she said quietly. "But if you ever need me, just know I'm here." I watched her walk away, her shoulders slumped as though she were carrying the weight I had carried for so long. For the first time, though, I felt lighter, stronger. The months that followed brought whispers of my parents' misfortunes. Their once thriving boutique, a cornerstone of their social standing, was struggling. Regular customers who had once admired their charm now saw them in a different light. "The Johnsons? No, thank you," I overheard one woman say at a coffee shop. "You can't trust them. Not after what they did to their own daughter." Their reputation crumbled, and with it, their financial stability. Rumors of bankruptcy surfaced, a sharp contrast to the life of comfort and privilege they had always enjoyed. While their worlds seemed to fall apart, mine was finally coming together. My wedding day arrived, not with the grandeur I had once imagined, but with something far better, a heartfelt celebration filled with love. The venue was small and intimate, decorated with simple elegance. Close friends and a few family members who had stood by me filled the space. Every moment felt like a stitch mending the fabric of my self-worth. "Congratulations, Kate," Uncle Tony toasted, raising his glass with a proud smile. "Here's to new beginnings and true happiness." The reception was filled with laughter and dancing. The soft glow of fairy lights and the scent of jasmine filled the air, creating a magical atmosphere. It wasn't perfect because it was extravagant. It was perfect because it was real. As my personal life flourished, so did my career. Promotions came my way, opening doors to new opportunities. I was invited to speak at marketing panels, where I shared my experiences and inspired others facing their own challenges. The toxic chaos that had once defined my life was gone. In its place was a newfound sense of control, choice, and peace. Looking back, I realized that losing my parents' support had been painful, but it also gave me the freedom to grow into my best self. My life was no longer about meeting others' expectations. It was about living on my terms. The journey wasn't easy, and there were days when the sadness crept in. But with every step forward, I felt stronger and more confident. My wedding, my career, and my happiness were all proof that I could build a life that was mine, free from the shadows of favoritism and silent resentment. For the first time in years, I felt truly at peace. My story wasn't about a wedding fund or a fancy kitchen. It was about finding my voice, reclaiming my dreams, and choosing a life where I came first. That was a gift I would never take for granted. I built a life surrounded by people who lifted me up instead of tearing me down. One quiet evening, I sat on my balcony, feeling the cool breeze play with the wind chimes. I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. The betrayal I experienced was a harsh lesson, but it taught me something priceless, my own worth and resilience. As I looked up at the stars, I realized that the hardest challenges in life often create the strongest people. My parents' decisions may have triggered everything, but it was my own choices that shaped the ending. In that moment of peace, I knew I had made the right choices for myself. This is Kate's story of betrayal, growth, and finding happiness. What do you think of her decision to distance herself from her family? Do you think it was the right choice, or could it have been handled differently? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed the story, and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring tales like this one. Your support helps us bring more stories to life.
Eric, you're a disgrace to this family. You're not welcome here. Those harsh words, filled with anger and disappointment, hit me like a punch to the chest. My own father said them, spitting them out like venom in the middle of my brother Caleb's wedding celebration. The sting of humiliation was unbearable, made worse by Caleb's silence. He stood there, saying nothing as our father threw me out like I didn't matter. I felt anger bubbling up inside me, ready to explode. I was about to storm out when something unexpected happened. A staff member at the wedding approached me, clearly overwhelmed and asking for help with a sudden crisis. Caught off guard, I stepped in to assist. That moment changed everything. For the second time in years, my father really saw me, saw the person I had become. Not the failure he thought I was, but someone capable and worthy. It was shocking, not just for him but for me too. My name is Eric, and I'm one of 3 brothers in this family. Growing up, our father was a strict, demanding lawyer who never hid his favoritism. My brother Caleb was the golden child, everything my father wanted in a son: confident, successful, and seemingly perfect. I, on the other hand, was always in his shadow, never measuring up to his expectations. There was no room for fun or rest in our house. Every moment had to be spent studying or attending lessons. If I found any joy, it was quickly crushed by my father's disapproval. No matter how hard I tried to match Caleb's achievements or earn my father's praise, I always came up short. The breaking point came when I failed the entrance exam for a prestigious school my father had been dreaming about for me. The silence from him afterward was worse than any yelling. It felt like I had disappeared in his eyes. From then on, all his attention shifted to Caleb, leaving me behind. Even my mother's quiet support couldn't fill the emptiness I felt. Determined to escape the suffocating environment at home, I made a difficult choice. After high school, I left without saying a word to my father. I wrote a note to my mother, telling her I was going to make my own way in life. I found a job at a hotel, and for the first time, I began to carve out my own path. The hotel became my safe place, a home and a job all in one. It was a world far from my father's expectations and judgments. Among the busy guests and hardworking staff, I found a freedom and sense of purpose I had never felt before. But the job wasn't easy. The hotel manager, Wayne, was strict and expected a lot from everyone. Every mistake I made was met with sharp criticism, and as someone fresh out of high school, I made plenty of them. "Eric, another mistake? How many times do I have to tell you?" he'd say, pushing me to improve. Unlike my father's harsh words, though, Wayne's feedback wasn't meant to tear me down. It was constructive, and when I finally earned his praise, it gave me pride and motivation, something I had never experienced before. One moment stands out clearly in my memory. It was San Antonio Day, the busiest time of the year for the hotel. I had just finished my training, and the pressure was overwhelming. Everyone was rushing, tensions were high, but I was determined to prove myself, not just to Wayne but to myself. In the chaos of the hotel, I realized something important. I didn't need my father's approval to see my own worth. I had built something on my own, and that was more valuable than any acknowledgement from him. That year, I was given the chance to work independently for the first time. It was tougher than I ever imagined. The hotel was overflowing with guests, far more than usual, and every part of the staff was stretched thin. Dinner service, both in the dining hall and through room service, was pure chaos. Despite being new and inexperienced, I threw myself into the work, determined to give my best. I didn't want to let the team down. Then, in the middle of San Antonio Day, just when things seemed under control, a colleague suddenly fell ill. We were already short-staffed, so I knew I had to step up. I worked extra hours, doing everything I could to keep things running smoothly. For a while, it seemed like we had managed to survive the chaos. But then disaster struck. A pipe burst in the kitchen during the peak of the dinner rush. Water flooded the kitchen, and with no plumber available on San Antonio Day, the situation quickly spiraled out of control. Wayne, usually calm and collected, looked stressed as he tried to manage the crisis. Everyone was scrambling, and the pressure was enormous. In that moment of desperation, I realized this was my chance to truly prove myself. I stepped forward. "Wayne, can I try fixing the plumbing?" "I think I can do it," I said. He looked at me with doubt, but there wasn't another option. After a moment of hesitation, he nodded. What no one knew was that my time in a science-focused high school had taught me the basics of plumbing. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give me confidence. I got to work right away. 40 minutes later, the kitchen was back to normal, the flood was cleaned up, and the pipe was fixed. I turned to Wayne out of breath and said, "It's done. I fixed it." He hurried over to check, turning the faucet with a mix of hope and worry. When water flowed smoothly, the room erupted in smiles and applause. "Great job, Eric. You're my pride and joy," Wayne said warmly. His words filled me with a sense of accomplishment I had never felt before. Growing up, I had always longed for approval like this, but here it was, earned through my own effort. That day marked a turning point for me. Together, Wayne and I had faced the challenges of that chaotic San Antonio day and come out victorious. The fulfillment I felt stayed with me and helped shape the person I became. 17 years later, I was thriving in my role at the hotel. I had built a career from the ground up and felt proud of the life I had created. Then one day, a letter arrived from my mother. It was the first communication I'd received from her in years. Inside, she told me about my brother Caleb's upcoming wedding and pleaded with me to attend. Though I had grown distant from both my father and Caleb, my mother's heartfelt words touched me. Reluctantly, I decided to go. The wedding venue was a grand, luxurious hotel, exactly the kind of place that reflected Caleb and Dad's taste for extravagance. I arrived in my dependable old suit, feeling out of place among the elegantly dressed guests. Everywhere I looked, there were signs of wealth and high society. Caleb's bride was stunning, with a graceful and polished demeanor. She seemed like the perfect match for his world. Part of me wondered if their union had been one of Dad's calculated moves, another way to strengthen his social ties. As I sat in the waiting area, I was surrounded by people of influence and privilege. I felt like an outsider, watching from the sidelines. The guests moved through their world with ease, their lives intertwined in ways I couldn't relate to. I was just an observer, detached from the wealth and power around me. For a moment, I questioned why I had come at all. But as I sat there, unnoticed and ignored, a realization dawned on me. I didn't need to fit into this world anymore. I no longer had to chase my father's approval or try to belong. The life I had built was far removed from this, and I was proud of that. I wasn't the boy who once sought validation from people who had dismissed him. I was someone who had found his own worth. I was Eric, a man who had found his own path. And for me, that was enough. But as I scanned the room, my eyes landed on two familiar faces. Instantly, a wave of unease washed over me. My father's expression was clear as day, pure disapproval. He and Caleb walked toward me, their presence heavy like a storm cloud. "Why are you here?" my father asked, his voice deep and commanding, laced with the same contempt I had grown up with. His words dragged back memories I had tried so hard to forget. "Is it so wrong to want to celebrate Caleb's wedding?" I replied, forcing a smile and trying to keep my tone casual. "Oh, and congrats, Caleb." Caleb gave a stiff nod, his face conflicted. I could see the tension in his eyes, torn between loyalty to Dad and the strained bond we'd always had. Before Caleb could say a word, Dad jumped in again, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. "What have you been doing all these years?" "Working some worthless job, no doubt." The disdain in his words was unmistakable, hitting me like a punch. "Eric, you shouldn't be here," he continued, his tone now dripping with contempt. Before I could reply, my mother rushed over, her face filled with worry as she tried to ease the tension. "Come on, Eric is here to celebrate. There's no need to be so harsh," she said, her voice shaky but full of hope. "Enough, Mom," Dad barked, his voice booming with authority. She fell silent. He turned back to me. "Eric, let me make this very clear. You are a disgrace. I don't want you ruining Caleb's celebration." No. Anger boiled inside me, fueled by years of rejection and neglect. I hadn't even wanted to come to this wedding, and now I was being humiliated in front of everyone. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. "Fine. I'm leaving," I said, my voice steady with resolve. I turned on my heel, ready to walk out and never look back. But just as I reached the door, a voice stopped me. A staff member hurried over, looking flustered and out of breath. "Excuse me," they said, their voice urgent. "We have a problem. An unexpected guest arrived, and we're short on seats and food." I turned back, glancing at the scene. The room was tense. Everyone, from Natalie the wedding planner to the in-laws, and even my father, was scrambling to figure out a solution. Worry was etched on their faces. For a brief moment, I hesitated. Part of me wanted to walk out and let them deal with their mess. Wasn't this the perfect chance to leave them to the chaos, just like they had left me behind so many times? But then, memories of the past came flooding back. Despite everything, I remembered the times when Caleb and I were kids. There were rare moments, but they were real, times when he'd make room for me during study breaks, and we'd play together even under Dad's strict rules. Those memories softened my anger, reminding me that once, we were brothers, not just rivals. If I walked away now, I'd be no better than the man my father always said I was. With a deep breath and a new sense of determination, I turned back to the staff member. "Take me to Natalie," I said, my voice steadier. The staff member's tense expression eased and they nodded, leading me back into the waiting room. As I walked in, I could feel the weight of the room. Natalie, my father, and the bride's father stood in the center, their faces etched with worry. The tension was thick, growing heavier with each passing moment. Natalie looked up as I approached, her surprise quickly replaced by relief. "Eric, thank goodness. We really need help," she said, explaining the mess with the unexpected guests and the seating arrangements. I nodded, taking in the situation. Despite my father's harsh words and Caleb's silence, I knew what I needed to do. "All right, let's get to work," I said firmly, stepping forward to take control. For the rest of the evening, I worked alongside Natalie and the staff, making sure everything went as smoothly as possible. Dinner unfolded without further problems, and the tension in the room began to ease. As I moved through the event, I couldn't help but notice the subtle glances from my father and Caleb. They didn't say anything, but their silence felt different this time, less dismissive, almost as if they were seeing me for who I really was. By the end of the night, I stood on the sidelines, watching Caleb and his bride share their first dance. The happy couple looked perfect together, surrounded by their world of wealth and elegance. I wasn't part of that world, but for the first time, I didn't feel like an outsider. I had proven something, not to them, but to myself. I didn't need their approval because I had built a life of my own. Quietly, I slipped away from the celebration, leaving before anyone could notice. As I walked out, I felt a calm I hadn't known in years. This wasn't my world anymore, and that was okay. I had found my own place in life, and for me, that was enough. Before I reached the exit, I locked eyes with my father one last time. His expression was cold, his hostility clear. "Why is Eric still here?" he demanded sharply, his tone cutting. Before the tension could escalate, Natalie stepped in. "Please, sir, we need your help," she said, her voice calm but urgent. The word "sir" and her respectful tone caught him off guard. For the first time, I saw a flicker of surprise on his face. He hadn't expected anyone to look at me with respect or authority. It was a small moment, but it was enough. I didn't need his approval, I had already found mine. I spoke calmly, revealing my position. "I've been the general manager of this hotel chain for quite some time," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Since I joined in the early days, we've expanded to several hotels and wedding venues across the country. In fact, this very hotel is under my supervision. I think I can handle this," I added with confidence, dismissing Dad's looming protests with a simple wave of my hand. "Dad, I'm busy right now. We'll talk later." Without waiting for his response, I turned to Natalie, focused on fixing the situation. "Relax, Natalie. Get the seating sorted, and I'll handle the food issue," I directed. She looked visibly relieved. "Understood," she replied, her voice lighter. I'll leave the food to you and take care of everything else." She hurried off to execute the plan. Knowing all eyes were still on me, I left the room and headed straight to the kitchen. Inside, my good friend, Chef Gabriel, was busy with the day's preparations. "Hey you," I called out, spotting him. "Eric, what brings you here?" he asked, curious. "I'm actually a guest today," I said, shaking my head with a chuckle. "It's my brother's wedding, but we've run into a little problem. We're one meal short. Think you can help?" Gabriel grinned. "Of course. I'll whip something up. Don't worry about it. Thanks so much. I owe you one. Maybe dinner next time," I said, feeling relieved. "Looking forward to it," he replied with a wink, already moving to prepare the missing meal. After tying up a few loose ends, I made my way back to the waiting room. Most of the guests had already moved to the ceremony area, leaving just my parents and the bride's family behind. I approached them with a confident smile. "The issue is resolved. An extra meal is on its way," I announced. Relief washed over my mom's face, and the bride's parents smiled warmly. Even my father, though still conflicted, seemed to hold back his usual sharp criticism. Instead, his voice softened, and for once, his pride was unmistakable. "Eric, thank you. Because of you, the celebration can go on without a hitch," he said, his gratitude genuine. "All in a day's work as a general manager," I replied with a small smile, feeling a quiet sense of victory. I led them to the ceremony hall, where the lights dimmed and the bride and groom made their grand entrance. They were radiant, their happiness lighting up the room. The ceremony unfolded beautifully, every detail falling perfectly into place, as if the earlier chaos had never happened. When it was finally time for the meal, I made sure everything ran smoothly. Each guest was served without issue. Only after confirming that all was in order did I allow myself a quiet sigh of relief, knowing the day had turned out well. I found myself chatting warmly with both families. They expressed their heartfelt gratitude, especially the bride's family, who kept thanking me over and over for stepping in when things were falling apart. In that moment, surrounded by smiles and kind words, I was reminded of why I loved my job. It wasn't just about managing a hotel or organizing events, it was about making a difference when it really mattered. "Eric, thank you so much. We had the best day ever, all because of you," they said, their appreciation sincere and heartfelt. "No worries. I'm just glad I could help. Wishing you both all the happiness in the world," I replied with a smile, feeling proud of how everything had turned out. Turning to face my parents and Caleb, I saw my mom's face glowing with pride. "Eric, you did wonderfully." "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with genuine admiration. Caleb stepped forward next. His apology was unexpected but sincere. "Thanks for stepping in." "I'm really sorry," he said, his tone honest. I couldn't help but smile. "As long as I could help, it's all good," I reassured him, feeling my earlier resentment melt away. Finally, I turned to my dad. He didn't say a word, his emotions hard to read, but there was something different in his eyes, a quiet acknowledgement. Though he stayed silent, I could tell, in his own way, he was grateful. It felt like a small but meaningful closure, a moment of understanding despite all our differences. Just then my phone buzzed. A message from another hotel in the next town reminded me that more work was waiting for me. Instead of feeling frustrated, I felt a sense of purpose. "Looks like I've got more work to do, but hey, I enjoy it, so no complaints," I said with a grin. "All right, I'm off. You too take care," I added before leaving. As I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this might be the last time I'd see Caleb or Dad for a long while, maybe even forever. The thought lingered, but I didn't dwell on it. I had work to do, and that's where I turned my focus. 7 days after Caleb's wedding, I finally got a rare day off. Reclining on my sofa with a steaming cup of coffee, I was soaking in a quiet moment of peace. That tranquility didn't last long, though. The doorbell rang. Curious, I got up and opened the door, surprised to see Caleb standing there. "Caleb? What brings you here?" I asked, caught off guard. "Sorry, I got your address from Mom. I wanted to talk to you," Caleb said, his tone cautious. I invited him in, not worrying about the state of my home. It was just Caleb after all. I poured Caleb a cup of coffee, and he took a slow sip. "Thanks," Smells good, he said, trying to smile. But I could tell there was more on his mind. As we sat down, his mood shifted. His gaze became serious, and I knew he had something important to say. After a moment of silence, he finally spoke. "I'm really sorry for everything," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. I was caught off guard. Caleb wasn't the type to apologize, and hearing him say this left me puzzled. "Hey, it's all right, Caleb," I said, trying to ease the tension. But it was clear he wasn't done. He took a deep breath and continued, opening up in a way I never expected. "You probably think I'm the older brother who has it all together, but the truth is, I envy you, Eric." His words hit me like a lightning bolt. I sat there, stunned, as the room filled with silence. I had always seen Caleb as the golden child, the one who had everything I didn't. But now, sitting across from me, he was showing a side of himself I had never seen before. His vulnerability took me by surprise and left me unsure of how to respond. For a moment, everything else, the rivalry, the distance, the tension, faded away. It was just the two of us, finally understanding each other in a way we never had before. "I never knew you felt that way, Caleb," I admitted, guilt creeping into my voice as I tried to process what he had just said. "That's the thing. It's not your fault, Eric," he reassured me, his weak smile showing the emotions he was trying to hold back. In that moment, I felt a sense of connection between us, something that had been missing for so long. "Caleb, I'm sorry I never realized you were struggling too," I confessed, regret heavy in my voice. His faint smile said more than words ever could. "It's really not your fault," he repeated, his voice quiet but steady. For the first time, we began to talk about the things we had never said out loud. The walls between us started to crumble, and our bond as brothers grew stronger. "I admire you, Caleb," I told him honestly. "You've gotten through things I can't even imagine. But I want to share my story with you too." As I spoke, I could feel the weight of my words. It wasn't just about telling him what I had been through, it was about building something new between us. This conversation wasn't just a moment. It was the start of something better. I paused for a moment to gather my thoughts. Caleb stayed silent, watching me closely, giving me the space to continue. "Breaking away from our parents and becoming independent wasn't easy," I said. "At the beginning it was really tough." As I spoke, I realized something. We had both faced our own battles in different ways. "Yeah, we've both had our struggles," Caleb agreed, his voice sincere. It felt like he wanted to say more, but he seemed unsure how to start. I didn't have all the answers, so I just spoke from the heart. "To be honest, Caleb, I think you should do what you really want to do, without worrying about Dad," I said, hoping it might give him some clarity. Caleb listened to my words, and I could see the weight lift off his shoulders. "You're right, Dirk. You've really helped clear my mind." "Thank you," he said, his gratitude clear in his tone. "No, thank you for coming over," I replied, and I meant it. I walked him to the door, and before he left, he promised to come back for coffee soon. 3 months later, I received a letter from Caleb. In it, he told me he had decided to leave his career as a lawyer and follow his true passion, glass craftsmanship. Even though Dad didn't approve, Caleb had found peace in his wife's support and a new drive to follow the path he had chosen. As I read his letter and thought about Caleb's journey, I felt proud. Our family dynamics had changed, and the bond between us had grown stronger. It felt like a new beginning for both of us. Lost in my thoughts, I was pulled back to reality by the sound of my phone alarm. It was time to start another day in the job I had chosen and grown to love.
It was just an ordinary day at the hotel, or at least that's how it started. My name's Isabella, and I manage the place, which means I'm always on my toes. The check-ins and check-outs never end, and neither do the complaints. You'd think I'd get used to it by now. I was at the front desk when this guy came striding over with an annoyed look. He was the picture of sophistication. Fancy suit, slicked back hair, and a scowl that could cut glass. Without a word, he slapped his phone on the counter and glared at me as if I'd personally wronged him. "The state of my room is unacceptable. Who's responsible for this?" he snapped, his voice like ice. I took a deep breath, putting on my best customer service smile. "I'm really sorry about that, sir. I'm Isabella, the manager. Let me fix this for you right away." He didn't relax one bit, still eyeing me with suspicion. I hope so. I was about to call the owner. What's your name again? Isabella, I repeated calmly. Let's get this sorted. How about I upgrade you to one of our best rooms free of charge to make up for the inconvenience? As we walked toward the new room, I could see him starting to unwind a bit. He let out a sigh and finally spoke in a softer tone, scratching the back of his neck. Sorry for blowing up like that. I'm Peter. Been on the road for weeks, and it's wearing me down. No worries, Peter, I replied, opening the door to one of our top rooms. We all have days like that. Let's just make sure the rest of your stay is pleasant. He looked around the upgraded room, and his tense expression shifted to relief. This will do nicely. Thanks, he said, with a small smile. Seeing him calm down was a relief for me too. As I finished the paperwork, we started chatting. Peter turned out to be a cryptocurrency investor, traveling the world to enjoy the rewards of his hard work. But he admitted, it's not as glamorous as it sounds. I nodded, handing him his new room key. I can imagine. But hey, at least you get to meet new people all the time, right? He chuckled, yeah, like hotel managers who know how to handle grumpy guests. I laughed. It's part of the charm of the job. Just before heading to his room, he paused. Hey, Isabella, would you like to grab dinner later? I owe you for putting up with my attitude. The invitation caught me off guard, but he seemed sincere, and I found myself smiling. Sure, Peter. That sounds nice. And so, that's how I ended up having dinner with a hotel guest. We talked about everything from the ups and downs of cryptocurrency to our favorite pizza toppings. He was easygoing, laughed a lot, and surprisingly, he didn't seem to mind the everyday chaos that came with my job. After that unexpected dinner, I found myself sharing a bit about my hectic day with Peter. Surprisingly, that one dinner turned into many more moments together. It wasn't like some cheesy romance. It felt genuine and real. After my shifts at the hotel, we'd sometimes grab a late-night snack or just wander around, talking until the early hours. One evening, we ended up in this small dive bar. It was the kind of place where everyone seemed to know each other, and the cold beer was always flowing. We tucked ourselves into a corner booth, and the noise around us faded into a quiet hum. Peter sat there, peeling the label off his beer bottle, a habit of his whenever something was on his mind. You know, Isabella, he started, looking down at the bottle. I've traveled a lot, seen a lot of places. But honestly, life on the road can get pretty lonely. I took a sip of my drink, watching him closely. Then why keep doing it? Why not settle down somewheres? He let out a short, dry laugh. Settle down and do what? Invest in real estate, get a dog, and mow the lawn on Fridays? That's not me. I chuckled, shaking my head. It doesn't have to be that predictable, you know. But I get it. Freedom's hard to give up. For a while, we just sat there, comfortable in the silence, listening to the buzz of the bar around us. I hadn't planned on it, but I started opening up about my own life, sharing more than I'd shared with anyone in a long time. After my parents died, it was just me and my little sister, Cheryl, I began, almost surprising myself with the words. I had to grow up fast and take care of both of us. I put everything on hold. Her schooling, her life, it all depended on me. Peter turned to me, his face serious and attentive. That's heavy, Isabella. It must have been tough, taking on so much. Yeah, I said, shrugging, trying to keep things from getting too intense. It was rough. But you play the hand you're dealt, right? He nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. You've done well for yourself, though, he said, a hint of admiration in his voice. Managing a whole hotel, paying the bills, making sure Cheryl had a pretty normal life. That's impressive. I laughed, genuinely this time. I guess. Just doing what I had to. Peter leaned in a little closer, his gaze steady and sincere. You're remarkable, you know that? Stop it, I replied playfully, swatting his arm, though his words warmed me in a way I hadn't expected. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly seen. To lighten the moment, I turned the conversation back to him. So, what about you? Ever think about having a family? Peter shifted in his seat, looking a bit uncomfortable. Family. That's complicated. Let's just say my parents and I don't see eye to eye. They have their empire, and I have my life on the road. I raised an eyebrow. An empire, huh? I nudged him playfully. An empire, huh? Sounds fancy. He gave a small smile, shaking his head. Not as fancy as it sounds. It's more like a lot of expectations and feeling tied down. We ended up talking for hours that night. Opening up seemed to break down walls between us, and for the first time, I felt like I was getting to know the real Peter. Before I knew it, the bartender was stacking chairs, a not-so-subtle hint that it was time to go. Things with Peter were going well, but he always kept a little distance when serious topics came up, like where our relationship was heading. Then one evening, everything shifted. I had invited him over for dinner at my apartment. It was his first time seeing where I lived, other than just picking me up for dates. As he walked around, he looked at everything with genuine curiosity. "This is nice, really nice, Isabella," he said, sounding almost surprised. I laughed, spreading my arms. "What did you think? That I lived in a shack or something?" He chuckled. "I don't know. I guess I hadn't really thought about it. My parents left us in a decent spot when they passed away. We sold their house, and I bought this apartment for Cheryl and me. I made the first payment, and now it's all ours." Peter nodded, clearly impressed. "You've done really well for yourself. I mean, really well." The evening went on, and after dinner, we settled on the couch, sharing a bottle of wine. That's when he dropped the bombshell. "Isabella, I've been doing a lot of thinking about us." My heart started to race. I looked at him, raising an eyebrow. "Oh yeah? And what have you been thinking?" He took my hand, his eyes meeting mine with a look I hadn't seen before. "I love you, Isabella. I know I said I wasn't looking to settle down, but with you it's different. I can't imagine being anywhere else but here, with you." His words hit me like a wave. Just a few weeks ago, he was all about freedom and not being tied down, and now this? But as I looked into his eyes, I could see he was serious. "Are you sure, Peter? This isn't just the moment talking, is it?" He shook his head, squeezing my hand. "I've never been more serious about anything, Isabella. Will you marry me?" The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. My mind raced, but my heart had already decided. Before I could think twice, I found myself saying yes. "Yes, I'll marry you." And just like that, we were engaged. A couple of weeks later, he surprised me with a beautiful ring. Simple but elegant. It felt surreal, like I was stepping into a dream I didn't want to wake up from. Peter dove into wedding planning almost immediately. "You deserve something amazing, Isabella. Let's have a wedding no one will ever forget," he said one evening as we went over budgets and venue options. When he brought up the financial plan, though, I felt a bit uneasy. "I've got all the contacts," Peter said confidently. "I'll handle the arrangements. You just provide the funds, say, $60,000, and I'll make sure our honeymoon is at the most luxurious hotel in the world. After that, we can get a house together." Hearing the amount made me pause. It was a lot, almost everything I had. But seeing the excitement on his face made me push aside my hesitation. He looked so thrilled, so certain. "Okay, if you think that's best." "I trust you, Peter," I replied, and then transferred the money to his account, letting him take the reins on planning. Watching him dive into the wedding arrangements made my heart swell. Here was a man who had appeared in my life out of nowhere, but now felt like he had always been meant to be here. Every night, I went to bed with a smile, feeling lucky and grateful for how perfectly everything was falling into place. As the wedding plans moved forward, I felt it was time for Peter to meet my sister, Cheryl. She was the only family I had left, and her opinion mattered, even though she could be a bit too blunt sometimes. We decided to meet up at the local diner where Cheryl worked as a waitress. As soon as we walked in, the bell above the door jingled, and Cheryl spotted us right away. Her face lit up, and she waved us over. "Hey, sis," she called out with a big grin. Her gaze shifted to Peter, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "And you must be the famous fiancé I've heard all about." Peter smiled, that charming smile of his, and extended his hand to her. "And you must be the beautiful sister I've heard so much about. You two could be twins." I rolled my eyes, feeling both proud and slightly embarrassed. All right, cut the charm, mister." Cheryl laughed, leaning in with a playful look. So, Peter, are you as rich as they say? I felt my cheeks heat up. Cheryl, I hissed, mortified by her directness. She always knew just how to push my buttons. But Peter just laughed, taking it all in stride. Well, I've done all right, he replied smoothly, but Isabella's right. It's not about the money. It's the love that matters. Cheryl raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed. Smooth talker, huh? I like him. Over the next few weeks, Peter continued to be the perfect fiancé, charming, attentive, and always making me feel like I was the most important person in his life. He even managed to handle Cheryl's playful teasing without missing a beat, which was a relief. Then, one day amid the wedding whirlwind, my best friend Lauren and I decided to visit a bridal shop to find my wedding dress. The shop was filled with silk, lace, and satin, a dream come true for any bride. As I stood in front of the mirror, being zipped into a gorgeous gown, the reality of it all started to hit me. This was really happening. Suddenly, I heard a familiar laugh coming from the next booth. Curious, I peeked around the curtain and there, twirling in front of a mirror, was Cheryl, in a wedding dress. Cheryl, I gasped, unable to hide my surprise. What on earth are you doing in a wedding dress? I stared at her, trying to wrap my mind around what she'd just said. Are you serious? Is there something you need to tell me? I asked, half amused and half concerned. Cheryl gave a little shrug, her smile crooked but distant. Just let it be a surprise, she said, her tone light but with something underneath. Lauren chuckled, watching the exchange. Looks like someone's caught the wedding bug. We all laughed it off, thinking Cheryl was just being her usual, playful self. I turned back to my reflection, adjusting the dress and refocusing on my own big day. But the image of Cheryl in that wedding dress stayed in the back of my mind. I brushed it off, convincing myself it was nothing. That day started like any other until it suddenly took a turn. After breakfast, Peter left in a hurry, mumbling something about an important meeting he couldn't miss. In his rush, he left his phone on the coffee table. A few minutes after he walked out, it started buzzing repeatedly. Curiosity got the better of me. I figured it might be something urgent about the wedding, or maybe work-related. Probably just a buddy checking in, I muttered to myself, picking up the phone. Peter had never bothered with a password, which I'd always found a bit casual. In hindsight, maybe that was my first clue. When the screen lit up, I saw a flood of messages, all from one contact, Cheryl. My heart skipped a beat. Why is he texting Cheryl so much? I thought, telling myself not to jump to conclusions. But the feeling gnawed at me, and I opened the messages. The first one hit me like a punch. I can't wait to be with you forever, Cheryl had written. Forget Isabella. It's you I want standing beside me. My heart started to race as I read Peter's reply. Soon, love. We just need to play along a little longer. She's so clueless, it's almost funny. I scrolled down, each message cutting deeper than the last. They were talking about the wedding, about me, about how they planned to use my money to start their life together once I was out of the picture. And then, the final blow. Cheryl was pregnant, with Peter's baby. The room spun, and I felt a wave of nausea. My baby sister, the one I had practically raised and supported, was betraying me in the worst way possible. And Peter, the man who had promised to love and protect me, was orchestrating this entire betrayal. An hour later, Peter came back, looking flustered. Hey, babe, did you see my phone? He asked, leaning down to kiss my cheek like everything was perfectly normal. I forced a fake smile, the same one I'd used countless times at the hotel to hide frustration. You left it here, I said sweetly, handing it to him. You must be slipping, leaving your lifeline behind. He took it, scrolling through his messages, probably checking if he'd missed anything critical. But I could see the faint look of relief on his face, thinking he'd dodged a bullet. Little did he know I had seen everything, and my mind was already racing, planning how to confront both of them. I watched him closely, trying to read any hint that he might suspect I knew the truth. But Peter was utterly clueless, wrapped up in his own lies. He laughed at something on his phone screen, and I felt my fists clench. Go ahead, laugh it up, Peter. Enjoy this moment while you still can. Later that night, as we lay in bed, he was all smiles, talking about our future together. It's going to be perfect, Isabella. This wedding, our life, you'll see. I turned to him, my heart torn between love and betrayal. I'm sure it will be, I murmured, letting him pull me close. Absolutely perfect. He drifted off to sleep, but I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with plans. I wasn't about to be the victim in this twisted game. If they wanted a show, I'd give them one they'd never forget. But first, I had to keep up the act of the loving fiancé just a little longer. Finally, the wedding day arrived, and with it, the stage for the performance of a lifetime. The grand hall was filled with flowers, and the guests were seated, whispering excitedly, completely unaware of the drama about to unfold. As we stood at the altar, just as we were about to exchange vows, the doors at the back of the hall burst open. Cheryl, wearing a wedding dress of her own, stormed down the aisle like she owned the place. The crowd gasped, turning to watch her as she marched right up to us, shoving me aside with a theatrical flair. I'm the one who deserves to be here, not you, Isabella, she announced loudly, her voice ringing through the hall. I'm having his baby. She turned to Peter. Tell everyone. Peter let go of my hand and laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that echoed through the room. Thanks, Isabella, for setting up this amazing wedding. It's perfect for me and your sister. The guests gasped, their faces frozen in shock. Peter continued, looking pleased with himself. Why don't you take a seat, Isabella? Enjoy the show as a guest. His words were meant to break me, but I just smiled calmly, stepping back with grace. Of course, I said, my voice steady. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Their smug smiles faded, confusion flickering in their eyes as I walked away, depriving them of the scene they'd expected. I sat down, crossed my legs, and watched the mess unfold before me, like a spectator in my own life. As Peter and Cheryl turned to face the priest and prepared to exchange their vows, another interruption stopped everything. A woman, clearly older and filled with fury, stormed down the aisle. Peter, she shouted, her voice slicing through the silence, and I saw Peter's face go pale. The entire room went dead quiet as the woman reached the altar, her face twisted in anger. I'm his wife, she declared, her voice shaking with rage. And the mother of his child, which he conveniently forgot, along with the vows he made to me. Cheryl's face drained of color, her legs seeming to buckle beneath her. She looked from Peter to the woman, then back at me, silently pleading for help, but there was nothing left to say. I simply leaned back, watching the chaos play out, feeling strangely free as my life unraveled, piece by piece, right in front of me. I stood up, my voice calm and steady, cutting through the noise. I have a little surprise for everyone too, I said, each word sharp and deliberate. Peter isn't just a cheater, he's broke. A private investigator confirmed that he's drowning in debt. His investments failed, and, worst of all, he's been stealing from his own family. The room erupted in shocked whispers, filling the air with the thrill of scandal. Peter's wife, now furious beyond words, turned her gaze to Cheryl. And you, she shouted, advancing toward my sister. How dare you? Cheryl stumbled back, tears streaming down her face as the full weight of her betrayal sank in. I watched, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. After weeks of pain and careful planning, seeing everything unravel felt like justice, though it left a hollow ache inside. Peter's wife continued, her voice harsh and unrelenting. He's left us with nothing, and you think he's going to build a life with you? Wake up, girl. Cheryl sobbed, her dream wedding unraveling into a nightmare. Peter tried to say something, desperate to salvage the situation, but his wife slapped him across the face, the sharp crack echoing through the hall and leaving everyone in stunned silence. As people were just beginning to absorb the chaos, the doors burst open again. This time, it was Peter's parents. They stepped inside, their faces filled with disbelief and disappointment. His father, a stern man in a well-tailored suit, scanned the room, his gaze finally landing on Peter. "I am utterly ashamed of you, Peter," his father's voice boomed, silencing the crowd. His gaze was hard and unyielding, as if he could force regret upon his son with a single look. His mother, a frail woman clutching a handkerchief, had tears streaming down her face. "My son, how could you?" she sobbed. "This is not how we raised you. Deceiving these women is unforgivable." Peter stood there, his usual charm crumbling under the weight of his family's public scorn. He opened his mouth to speak, maybe to explain, but his father cut him off coldly. "You are no longer part of this family's legacy. Consider yourself without an inheritance." The crowd erupted again, guests pulling out their phones, eager to capture the dramatic downfall of what had once been planned as my perfect wedding. In the weeks that followed, I took Peter to court. I sued him to recover the $60,000 he had conned out of me. I had foolishly handed over the money for the wedding, trusting Peter completely. But with clear evidence in hand, the judge ruled in my favor, ordering Peter to repay every single penny. Shortly after, Peter's wife filed her own lawsuit, seeking damages for emotional distress, deception, and alimony for their daughter. I attended every court session, feeling a bittersweet sense of justice as I watched Peter face the consequences of his lies. To my surprise, Cheryl was there by his side, supporting the man who had almost destroyed me. One day, outside the courtroom, she confronted me, her face full of hurt and defiance. "He loves me, Isabella, and I love him. We're going to get through this, no matter what you or anyone else thinks," she said, her voice shaking but determined. I looked at her, the sister I had once loved deeply, now seeming like a stranger. "Love? You call this love?" I asked, my voice thick with disbelief. "He used both of us, Cheryl. Open your eyes, he's a liar." "But he's changed," she insisted, her voice trembling. "He'll change for me. You just couldn't see the good in him." I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "Good? Cheryl, there's no good in him. He's a con artist, and you're just another one of his victims." As I walked away, a heavy weight settled over me. The lies, betrayal, and endless court battles had taken their toll, yet I felt a strange sense of closure. The man who had once promised to love me had shown his true self, and I had exposed him for what he truly was. The final chapter with Peter didn't end in a grand spectacle, but in quiet resignation as he slipped out of town, leaving a trail of broken promises and unpaid debts. Before disappearing, he had somehow managed to settle his debts with me and his legal wife, perhaps hoping to clear his slate. But he left the biggest mess behind with Cheryl, my sister, who was now alone and pregnant. A few weeks after Peter vanished, Cheryl showed up at my apartment. It was the first time I'd seen her since the courthouse drama. She stood there, a shadow of her former confident self, her eyes downcast. "Isabella, I need help," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He left me, and I'm going to have his baby. I have nothing." The old me, the one who had raised her, might have opened the door and welcomed her back without a second thought. But too much had happened, too much hurt to easily forget. "You have the apartment," I said quietly, my voice firm but not unkind. "And you'll have the baby. That's a start. You're not on the streets, Cheryl. You're not helpless." "But I don't have any money, Isabella. The bills, the baby. I need help," she pleaded, desperation filling her eyes. I shook my head, the decision solid in my heart, even as it hurt to see her like this. "You made your choice, Cheryl. Now you have to make another. You can figure this out." She stared at me, realization dawning in her eyes, and I closed the door. I knew it was time for her to find her own strength, just as I had. "I had to be strong when Mom and Dad died," I said, my voice steady, "and I had to be strong when you betrayed me." Cheryl broke down, covering her face with her hands, her body trembling. "I never meant to hurt you. I thought I was in love. I really did." "Love doesn't make you betray your family," I replied, my words firm. "Love doesn't make you stand by while I was humiliated. If you loved me, you would have stayed away from him, or told me the truth before everything fell apart." Cheryl looked up, desperation filling her eyes. "So, that's it? You're just going to turn me away?" "Yes," I answered, my voice unwavering. "You're going to walk away from here and take care of your child, just like I took care of you." I turned, walked back into my apartment, and closed the door, shutting out her cries with a final, echoing slam. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, but I knew it was necessary. After that day, life gradually returned to a quiet, peaceful normal that I hadn't realized I missed. I threw myself back into work, picked up old hobbies I had neglected, and slowly rebuilt the independence that had always been a part of who I was. As for Cheryl, I heard through family friends that she had her baby, a little girl. They said she was managing getting by on her own. I sincerely hoped she would find her way, that she would grow strong as a mother in the way she hadn't as a sister. "You've got to be joking. The problem is with you. Why haven't you settled the payment for the accommodation?" I asked, my voice shaking with frustration. "Because you're the one who left me," my husband shot back. "Just bring the money here," I demanded. "I'm not going to do that. I'm the one who was left behind," he said coldly. "I didn't even want to go on that trip in the first place." This was just another day in our troubled marriage. My husband and I have been married for 7 years. We have a 6-year-old daughter who is the light of my life. Watching her grow, laugh, and discover the world has been the best part of every single day. But sadly, my relationship with my husband has been falling apart. When my daughter turned 1, I decided to quit my job. It wasn't an easy decision, but I wanted to be there for her as she grew. However, instead of supporting me, my husband made it clear that if I wasn't working, I had to take care of all the housework by myself. So I did it all. I cleaned, cooked, and took care of our baby without any help. When she was a newborn, I barely got any sleep. It was exhausting. I remember one night, feeling so drained, I asked my husband to help. His response shocked me. "If you don't like it, I can divorce you anytime," he said without hesitation. He even showed me a set of completed divorce papers. He put them in the drawer right in front of me, as if to remind me that he could leave whenever he wanted. After that, whenever we had an argument, he would pull out those papers and mention divorce with a disgusted look on his face. And then there's my mother-in-law, the person who raised him to think this way. She's just like him, controlling and critical. She comes over to our house whenever she wants without asking. One day, she visited unannounced, opened the fridge, and started eating my daughter's yogurt without even asking. But that wasn't the worst of it. Whenever she came over, she would lecture me endlessly about how a proper wife should behave. She'd even inspect the corners of my house for dust and criticize me if she found any. Today, she came over again. "I have good news for you," she said with a big smile. I didn't trust her at all. "What is it?" I asked cautiously. "What's wrong with you? You should look happier when I'm bringing good news," she snapped. "You're so ungrateful, just like my son says." "Okay, what's the news?" I asked, forcing myself to stay calm. "We're going on a trip," she announced proudly. "Where to?" I asked, confused. "It's your job as the unemployed one to figure that out," she said with a smirk. "Honestly, you're really not very smart, are you? It's such a shame." And just like that, she left me feeling small and defeated once again. "I have a surprise for my son, who works so hard all the time," my mother-in-law announced, looking pleased with herself. "A surprise?" I asked, unsure what she meant. "Yes. Let's help him relax and leave behind all his tiredness," she said with a smile. But something in her tone made me feel uneasy. It didn't take long for me to figure out what she meant. My mother-in-law wanted to take her son, my husband, on a trip. The problem? She didn't want to pay for it herself. Instead, she had come up with a plan to invite me and my daughter along. And guess what? She wanted me to cover the entire cost of the trip. Who would want to go on such a trip? Certainly not me. Besides, we simply couldn't afford it. "Let's make it a grand trip," she added cheerfully, acting as if money wasn't an issue. "No, I never said I was going," I replied firmly. "Let me think about this for a while," I added, trying to end the conversation without upsetting her further. That evening, My husband came home from work in a terrible mood. I immediately knew why. My mother-in-law must have called him and told him about our conversation. "I heard you disobeyed my mother today," he said, confronting me as soon as he stepped through the door. "I was just telling her the truth," I replied, feeling defensive. "What truth?" "That we can't take her on vacation," he asked, his voice rising. "That's right. We don't have that kind of money," I admitted, feeling the heavy weight of our financial situation pressing down on me. But he wasn't ready to listen. "My mother said it was a surprise. She already told me about the trip." "What's the surprise in this?" I asked, frustrated. "If we can't manage our finances, how are we supposed to afford a trip?" "It's your fault we can't manage the money," he snapped. "How am I supposed to manage money that we don't even have?" I shot back. "Are you trying to say that I don't make enough?" he asked, clearly offended. "Well, it's not exactly much," I said, unable to hold back my honesty. "You've got to be kidding me," he grumbled. "Anyway, I'm going on this trip. You need to plan everything." "That's an order. And if you can't do it, we're getting a divorce?" His words cut deep. I felt my heart sink. "I might as well get a divorce now," I muttered quietly under my breath. But as frustrated as I was, one thought kept me from saying more. What will my daughter think? She was the only reason I hadn't walked away already. In the end, I found myself searching for hotels and trying to plan the trip, not because I wanted to, but because I had no choice. I wasn't even sure about going on the trip, but my mother-in-law kept insisting. After talking with my husband, she became even pickier about her demands. "I want a room with an open-air bathtub," she declared. "And the meals must be the most luxurious ones at the hotel." Her requests seemed endless, and I couldn't help but wonder how much all of this would cost. But if I didn't meet her demands, I knew what would happen. I'd be met with another storm of sarcasm and criticism. It felt like I had no choice but to give in, even though it frustrated me deeply. Finally, I decided to take a bold step. I shamelessly went ahead and fulfilled all of her requests. But the way I managed it wasn't something she expected. When my mother-in-law found out everything was arranged just the way she wanted, she became oddly tense and annoyed. "This is all thanks to my mom," she said, saying something that didn't make much sense. But I ignored it. That evening, during dinner, my husband started one of his usual lectures. He had this habit of scolding me over the smallest things. But after 5 years of dealing with it, I had become almost immune. I let him talk and didn't even bother responding. Thankfully, he never used sarcasm or harsh words in front of our daughter. It seemed like he didn't want her to see that side of him, which gave me some relief. The day of the trip finally came. I found myself sitting in the driver's seat, gripping the wheel tightly. Of course, I was the one who rented the car and, naturally, the one doing all the driving. My husband sat comfortably in the passenger seat, acting like he owned the car. In the back seat, my mother-in-law kept talking to herself about souvenirs she wanted to buy, completely ignoring my daughter, who was trying to get her attention. I drove all morning without a single offer of help from either of them. No one asked if I needed a break or if I was tired. Finally, we stopped at a service area because my daughter needed to use the restroom. I quickly took her, relieved for a moment to stretch my legs, and hurried back to the parking lot. But when we returned, the car was gone. I froze, my heart pounding as I looked around the lot. The car was nowhere to be seen. Feeling panicked, I called my husband. He didn't pick up. Next, I tried calling my mother-in-law. "You two took too long," she said with a laugh, her tone cold and uncaring. So we left. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They had actually left us behind. I tried to explain what had happened, but she wasn't interested. It was clear they had no intention of coming back for us. I stood there, holding my daughter's hand, wondering what I was going to do next. I had only gone to the bathroom for a few minutes, but when I called my husband to find out why he left, his voice cut through the phone with anger. "This is your fault," he said coldly. "You don't listen to me. You have no right to go on this trip. Was this your plan all along? If so, what now?" I felt my heart sink, but he wasn't done. "I'm fine, but what about Carol? She's turning out just like you. Too cocky. She even talked back to my mom when she complained about you. She needs to be punished too. I was stunned. My daughter, Carol, had only stood up for me, and now he wanted to punish her for that? But, he added, since she was looking forward to this trip, I might think about it again when you both apologize. If you understand, you can go home now. Before I could respond, he hung up the phone. I stood there in shock, holding the phone in one hand and my daughter's hand in the other. What was I supposed to do now? I realized how far we were from home. Mom, are you okay? Did Dad and Grandma leave us? Carol asked, her small voice breaking the tense silence. I knelt down to her level and forced a smile. I guess so, sweetheart. They're so mean, aren't they? She asked. Yeah, I think so too, I said softly. Are we going home? She asked, tilting her head. I hesitated. Yes, but you were really looking forward to this trip. She smiled sweetly. Only because I was with you, Mom. If you're going home, I'll go home too. Her words warmed my heart. Then let's go on an adventure instead, I said, trying to make the best of the situation. An adventure? Carol's eyes lit up, her carefree smile bringing me a sense of peace. I called my friend Nicole, who lived nearby, and told her everything that had happened. Without hesitation, she came to pick us up and drove us home. Later that evening, after Carol had fallen asleep, Nicole and I sat down to talk. So, what are you going to do now? Nicole asked, concern in her eyes. I took a deep breath. I think I'm getting a divorce. Nicole nodded. That's a good decision. You've put up with this for far too long. Yeah, I said, feeling a strange sense of relief. And I don't want Carol to grow up with a father who harms her emotionally anymore. The next morning, I signed the divorce papers that had been sitting in the drawer for years. Nicole filled in the witness box, and, ironically, my mother-in-law's name was already written in the other box. Thanks to that, I was able to file the papers immediately. 5 days after returning home, my phone rang. It was the beginning of a new chapter in my life. After dropping my daughter off at kindergarten, I got a call from my husband. His tone was sharp and angry. You've got to be kidding me. You're the one causing all the problems. Why haven't you paid for the hotel accommodation? He demanded. Because you're the one who left me behind, I shot back. You should have paid for it in advance. Oh, really? He sneered. And why does it cost $10,000? That's ridiculous. It costs that much because it includes all the special requests your dear mother made, I replied sarcastically. You and your mother had a great time there, so why don't you split it? That would be $6,000 each. There was silence for a moment, then I heard a woman's voice in the background. She sounded frustrated, likely someone from the hotel asking for payment. I'll call the police if you don't pay, the woman warned. No problem, my husband responded smugly. My wife will pay. She's on her way here right now. The woman's voice grew colder. Where is your wife now? She asked. At home, my husband answered casually. The woman's tone sharpened. I checked your address, and it seems like your wife is far from home. Didn't you leave her at a service area? And now you're telling her to come and pay? My heart swelled with gratitude when I realized who the woman was. She continued, her voice now directed at him. Excuse me, your wife and I have been friends since high school. I was the one who picked her and your daughter up from the service area after you abandoned them. She was Nicole, my old friend, and someone I could always count on. I had called her when I was stranded, asking for help with the trip. What I didn't know was that Nicole owned a hotel. When I explained my situation, she surprised me by offering us her hotel accommodation for free. You don't have to worry about paying, Nicole had told me at the time. It's the least I can do for you. I was shocked. Back in high school, Nicole had struggled with her future. Her family owned a well-known hotel, but she had different dreams. As the only daughter, she felt obligated to take over the business, even though it wasn't what she wanted. I had been her shoulder to lean on, encouraging her to follow her heart. Though she ended up managing the hotel, she told me she never forgot how much I supported her during that difficult time. She felt like she owed me a favor and saw this as the perfect opportunity to repay me. I told your husband there's no payment needed, Nicole said firmly. But he clearly doesn't care about you. I felt a mix of gratitude and sadness. Nicole's kindness reminded me that there were still good people in my life, even as I prepared to let go of my marriage. I don't have a personal connection with you, Nicole said firmly. In other words, you're just hotel guests. Since you're only guests, I'd like you to pay the full price for your stay. My husband, caught off guard, tried to argue. All right, look, why don't you put it on your credit card for now, and I'll charge it to my wife later? Nicole wasn't having it. I don't want to do that, she replied calmly. It's not that you don't want to, Nicole added with a sharp tone. It's that you can't. Isn't that right? My husband's face went pale. Wait, what do you mean? He stammered. Well, Nicole explained, your salary is $3,500 a month, and your credit card limit can't be more than $6,000. Isn't that correct? My husband stood frozen, unable to respond. Nicole turned to me. He said you're lying about his income. He claimed he had a great salary. I sighed. He's a salesman. He gets incentives when he makes a big sale, but most of the time, he only gets the minimum guaranteed salary. He brags about his income, but the truth is, it's nowhere near enough to pay for something like this. Nicole wasn't impressed. Don't tell me you're planning to pay for this out of savings, she said, looking at him sharply. No way, I said before he could speak. That money is for divorce costs, child support, and alimony. What are you talking about? My husband snapped, his voice rising. I filed for divorce, I said, standing tall. You've been threatening me with divorce for years, remember? You always said you'd divorce me anytime. Well, I finally did it. I submitted the papers as fast as I could. He looked stunned. Wait, what? You're serious? Yes, and since we're not married anymore, I don't owe you anything. Not now, not ever. My husband had no choice but to promise Nicole he would pay the hotel bill in installments. After that, I contacted an attorney to formally file for custody of my daughter, child support, and alimony. I packed up our belongings and took my daughter back to my parents' house, where we started fresh. Ironically, one of the regular guests at Nicole's hotel was an executive from my husband's company. When he found out about the situation, he ordered my ex-husband to pay the full hotel bill immediately. As for my mother-in-law, she was furious when she discovered how little her son earned. She called me, begging me to reconsider the divorce. She wanted her son to support her in the future and couldn't believe I'd actually left him. My ex-husband also called me, insisting that Carol needed a father and that we should remarry. I ignored him. Now, my daughter and I are happily living with my parents. Carol is smiling more than ever, and I feel free for the first time in years. There's no way I'm going back to that life. I don't even know what my ex-husband is talking about anymore. He says our daughter needs him, but he never really took care of her anyway. After the divorce, he moved back into his mother's house. At work, things aren't going well for him either. He's not a good planner, so he waited until the last minute to apply for vacation time for that trip. On top of that, the company executive found out about how he couldn't even pay for the hotel. Now, his poor performance and financial issues are common knowledge at work, and he's feeling embarrassed and small. Meanwhile, my life is finally moving in the right direction. Next weekend, my daughter and I are going to stay at this house hotel, the same hotel Nicole runs. It's nice to have something to look forward to, especially since I've also started a new job. It's been years since I last worked, but going back to work has been so fulfilling. It's nothing like the draining and one-sided marriage I had. I feel productive and free, building a better future for myself and my daughter. I used to think it was better for children to grow up with both parents under the same roof, but I've learned that's not always true. In our case, it was far better to leave. What really matters is having happy parents who can raise their children in a healthy environment. This divorce has taught me so much. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. The most important lesson I've learned is that my daughter will always be my first priority. No matter what challenges come our way, I know I'll always do my best for her. With her by my side, I feel like I can take on anything. She's my biggest source of strength and happiness. Her smile reminds me every day that I made the right decision by walking away from a toxic marriage. I sometimes wonder where people like my ex-husband get their confidence from. He acts so entitled and sure of himself, even when he's clearly in the wrong. Maybe it's just a front to hide his insecurities. Either way, it doesn't matter to me anymore. The divorce was the best decision I've ever made. It gave me the freedom to rebuild my life and give my daughter a better future. Now, I can honestly say I'm happy. I'm grateful for my daughter, my supportive friends like Nicole, and the second chance I've been given. I hope for a peaceful and happy life for the two of us from now on. My daughter deserves nothing less, and I'll make sure she has the love, security, and support she needs to thrive.
My daughter Anna got married recently, and I was there to support her as her dad. I raised her alone after her mother passed away, but at her wedding I felt out of place. She had labeled me as just a useless middle school graduate. The event was filled with high-status people, making it clear that I didn't belong. The atmosphere at the celebration was tense, and it all fell apart when Anna suddenly ripped off her wedding dress and shouted, "Dad, let's go home." I agreed, and just as we turned to leave, a loud scream came from an unexpected direction. The guests froze in shock at what they saw. My name is Paul, and I'm 63 years old. I have one daughter, Anna, and she's always been special. When she was just 6, she came to me with a drawing. "Daddy, look at this," she said excitedly. It wasn't an ordinary drawing. It was a diagram of a ballpoint pen she had taken apart. Anna often took things apart to see how they worked, but drawing a detailed diagram of it was something I never expected. At that moment, I knew she was destined to do great things. Anna has always been physically weak, so she couldn't play outside much like other kids. Instead, she spent her time doing experiments and exploring things that fascinated her. She became curious about astronomy and weather. One day she asked me, "Daddy, why do clouds float in the sky?" It was a simple question, but I had never really thought about it before. I explained, clouds aren't solid. They're made of tiny droplets of water. Because of gravity, temperature, and how light the droplets are, they float instead of falling. I worried the explanation might be too complicated for her, but she took my answer and ran with it. She asked her teacher about clouds and read everything she could find in the library. By the time she was 12, she understood the science behind clouds better than most adults. Even her teachers were amazed by her curiosity and intelligence. Anna didn't get her talent from me. I don't have any special skills, but her mother was both beautiful and brilliant, a perfect mix of looks and intelligence. Anna must have inherited her gifts from her. My wife, however, passed away the day Anna was born. Everything seemed fine during the pregnancy and delivery, but moments after Anna was born, my wife's condition took a turn for the worse. Her body tensed up, and in a few seconds, her heart stopped. With today's medical technology, there's a much higher chance of survival in cases like hers, but back then, things weren't as advanced. There was a 95% chance of death for mothers who developed her condition, which was extremely rare. Only a few dozen women in the American experience it each year. My wife gave her life to bring Anna into this world. She didn't even get the chance to see the daughter she had sacrificed everything for. I didn't know what to do. Of course, I loved my daughter Anna. But I never imagined she came into this world by taking her mother's life. Sometimes, when I looked at her peaceful sleeping face, so much like her mother's, it felt almost cruel. What was I supposed to do? The happiness I had dreamed of, the months I spent with my wife, excited for Anna's arrival, shattered like glass in an instant. Overcome with emotions, I cried until I had no tears left. Then, through my despair, I heard a tiny voice that reminded me of what I still had to do. "Anna, all right. You're hungry, aren't you? It's time for your milk," I said. "Don't worry, I'll protect you no matter what." Holding her tiny, warm body in my arms, I made a promise to myself. Even if I had to do it alone, I would raise Anna to be a strong, happy adult. I would give her anything she needed and be there for her, always. As if she understood my thoughts, she wrapped her tiny hand around my finger. Oh, what were we talking about again? Her voice snapped me back to the present. Standing in front of me, with a smile as bright as the sun, was Anna. She had grown into a beautiful, confident young woman. She looks just like her mother. Anna, now 25, has healthy, sun-kissed skin, long chestnut hair with soft waves, and striking light blue eyes. "Which of these dresses do you think looks better?" she asked, holding up two options. "How about the powder blue one on the right? It matches your eyes and looks beautiful." Her eyes sparkled as she smiled softly at my answer. Over the years, noticing how much Anna resembled her mother brought me quiet comfort. Her hair, her eyes, even her expressions reminded me of the love of my life. And now, my little girl was about to get married. Her fiancé, Adam, works at the same company as her. When they came to tell me about their engagement, I liked him right away. "I'm still learning," Adam had said, "and honestly, Anna doesn't need anyone to take care of her. She's amazing on her own. But I want to be the person who supports her when she's tired, someone she can lean on when she needs a break." Hearing those words surprised me, but they also touched my heart. Most of all, Anna had chosen him, and that was enough for me. I gave them my blessing, even though it was her choice, not mine. Since then, I've noticed how much happier she looks around Adam. My serious, hard-working daughter has a lightness in her eyes when she's with him, a bit like how I felt when I was with her mother. Before I knew it, the wedding preparations were in full swing, and my little girl was about to start a new chapter in her life. I muttered to myself, "Is it really okay that I haven't met his parents yet?" Anna and Adam had already introduced both sets of parents to each other, but I hadn't had the chance to meet Adam's parents. I thought we should at least meet before the wedding, but neither Anna nor Adam seemed interested in setting it up. "I don't think it's necessary for you to meet them before the wedding," Anna said. "I agree. There's no need to trouble you with it, sir," Adam added. Their words felt off, like they were trying to hide something. Still, I figured they must have their reasons, so I decided not to push it. I chose to respect their wishes and stayed out of it. Today, however, was the wedding rehearsal, and I was told Adam and his parents would be arriving soon. Oddly enough, I felt nervous. I kept pacing, sipping coffee, and heading to the bathroom every 45 minutes. When I finally heard the door open, I froze as Adam walked in, followed by three people I assumed were his parents. Adam's mother, Lauren, looked me up and down, her gaze moving from my head to my toes like she was sizing me up. I'd heard she was in her 60s, but she looked much younger than that. Trying to ignore the awkward tension, I introduced myself. "Nice to meet you. I'm Paul, Anna's father." I extended my hand for a handshake, but neither of them took it. Feeling uneasy, I looked at them closely. Both were staring at me with cold, judging eyes. "Oh, I thought Anna's father would be quite handsome since she's such a beauty," Lauren said with a laugh that was more mocking than kind. Standing beside her, Adam's father had a stern, almost hostile expression. In a deep voice, he muttered, "About 5 feet 8 inches, average face, not overweight but not slim either. Just ordinary." The sarcastic tone in his voice was sharp, and something about it felt familiar. My mind raced, trying to figure it out. Then it hit me. I knew this man. The arrogant look, the mocking tone, it all came flooding back. "You've got to be kidding me. James?" I blurted out. "That's right," he said, a smirk on his face. "Long time no see." I couldn't believe it. The man standing in front of me, my daughter's future father-in-law, was none other than my old nemesis from middle school. James and I had been classmates for only 4 years, but those years were enough to leave a mark. Back then, I was always ranked first in our grade, and James was consistently second, right behind me. He had always seen me as a rival, even though I never thought of him that way. "You're so obnoxious, Paul," he'd say. "You're always at the top of the class. Couldn't you let me have it just once? That's why I can't stand perfectionists like you." He'd say things like that while I quietly read my books. But it wasn't about being a perfectionist, I just couldn't be satisfied unless I gave my best effort. I never imagined I'd run into him again, especially not here, and certainly not as the father of my daughter's fiancé. I always gave everything my best effort, so my test scores were nearly perfect, either 400 or sometimes 395 because of small mistakes. James was smart too, but no matter how hard he tried, he could never beat me. After every test, he'd throw snide remarks my way, clearly frustrated. Then, one early summer before graduation, my life fell apart. My parents passed away. I won't go into the details, but the loss completely shattered me. I lost all motivation. I didn't even show up for the final exams and stayed home, drowning in grief. I barely noticed the summer heat fading into autumn. Even though my earlier high grades allowed me to move up a grade, I became a recluse, staying with relatives and shutting myself off from the world. During that dark time, James saw an opportunity to tear me down further. "See? You got what was coming to you," he sneered. "This is what happens when you hog the spotlight and don't let others have a turn. Now you've fallen and I'm rising. Unlike you, I'm transferring to a prestigious private high school, and I'm going to become a government official. You'll be stuck watching my success from the sidelines for the rest of your life." Those were his parting words before he disappeared from my life. I later heard he moved to a dorm to attend that private school. I didn't go to any reunions or keep in touch with my old classmates. I completely cut ties with my past. Just when I thought I would never recover from losing my parents, a ray of hope appeared in my life: my wife. She was 4 years older than me, and meeting her changed everything. She helped me rethink my life and gave me the strength to move forward. Even though I later had to face losing her too, she left me with the most precious gift, our daughter, Anna. Since then, I've dedicated my entire life to raising Anna and ensuring her future was bright. I worked tirelessly, doing everything I could to give her the life she deserved. Now, just as I thought she'd found the perfect person to marry, I find out her future father-in-law is none other than my old rival, James. It felt like fate was punishing me for my past, for running away when life got hard. I took a deep breath and turned to face James. "James, I never imagined I'd run into you again, especially at this stage of life." James smirked, that same arrogant grin I remembered from years ago. "Yeah, funny how life works. Who would have thought the daughter of an useless middle school graduate like you would end up marrying my son? Life sure is unpredictable." His words were a clear insult. I didn't care if he looked down on me, I was used to that, but dragging my daughter into it was something I couldn't tolerate. I had spent my entire life protecting and raising Anna, and hearing him belittle her hit a nerve I couldn't ignore. Back in the day, I never fought back, no matter what James said. I hated confrontation and always avoided it. But this time was different. I looked him in the eye and spoke firmly, "Let me make one thing clear. This marriage is about Anna and Adam, not about us. Whatever you think of me doesn't matter. My only focus is their happiness. We're only becoming in-laws, nothing more, nothing less." "Don't mix it up," I said firmly. My words seemed to hit a nerve. James, with his usual smugness, sat down on the sofa, crossed his legs, and said, "I have no intention of becoming in-laws with someone like you. I'll admit Anna is brilliant enough to marry into our family, but once they're married, she'll cut ties with you and become a stranger. We plan to adopt Anna as our own daughter the moment she marries into this family." Before I could even respond, Adam stepped in. "Dad, hold on. This is the first I'm hearing about this." "Mom, did you know about this?" Lauren, in a mocking, playful tone, replied, "Oh, who knows? I'm just a woman who married into this family. Whatever your father says goes, right? If he says it'll happen, then it will." Then she turned to Adam and added, "Has talking to a useless middle school graduate lowered your IQ or something?" Her words weren't just insulting, they were cruel. It wasn't what she said about me that upset me, it was the way she spoke to her own son. I could see Adam's face tighten, his fists trembling slightly. Now I understood why Adam and Anna had been so hesitant to arrange this meeting. It must have been a shock for Adam to realize his father and I had a history. As I thought about James's petty remarks and Lauren's heartless attitude, I couldn't help but wonder what kind of parents they were. Before I could figure out how to respond, Anna stepped in to diffuse the tension. "Let's not have this kind of atmosphere during the dress fittings and rehearsal, okay? We also have a tasting for the meals today, so please enjoy yourselves." She spoke calmly but firmly, changing the subject without addressing the conflict. Lauren stood up, nodding as if nothing had happened. "That's right. We didn't come here to waste time. We're here to make sure the food we serve to our guests is up to standard." As she turned to leave, I noticed something odd. She dragged her right foot slightly as she walked. "Your right foot?" I started to ask, but Lauren cut me off sharply. "Your concern is unnecessary. What could a middle school graduate like you possibly know? She snapped before walking out with James. The door closed, and silence filled the room. It was just me, Anna, and Adam now. Adam took a deep breath and then bowed his head deeply. I'm so sorry for my parents' rude behavior, he said. They've always had this superiority complex, and even I can't control them. If only my brother were here. It was then that I learned about Adam's older brother. He had passed away while abroad. My brother was an incredible pharmacist, Adam explained quietly. He was gifted from a young age, and my parents always held him in the highest regard. After he passed, it's like they've been trying to control me even more, as if I have to fill his shoes. Hearing this, I felt a mixture of sadness and respect for Adam. Despite the pressure from his parents, he was standing strong for Anna and trying to make their future work. It gave me hope that maybe, together, they could rise above all this. Adam's older brother had always been passionate about pharmacology, and everyone believed he was destined to become a top professional in the field. But when he turned 26, he made a sudden announcement. He was going overseas. My parents tried to stop him, Adam explained. If it had been for a vacation or to train at a world-famous hospital, things might have been different. But the path my brother chose was much harder. He paused, then continued, Have you heard of those medical organizations that work in dangerous areas? Hearing that, my heart sank. I swallowed hard and answered, Yes, I've heard of them. So, your brother? Adam nodded silently. That's why my parents didn't want him to go. He didn't need to say anything more. I could already imagine the weight of what he must have gone through, as well as what might have happened to his brother. The room fell into a heavy silence, the kind where no one knows what to say next. Anna, however, broke through the gloom. Hey, why are we getting so down? I've heard Adam talk about his brother before, and I know the story. But I'm sure he wouldn't want us to be sitting here all sad, right? Her words seemed to lift Adam's spirits, even if only a little. Yeah, you're right, he said. Let's just focus on the wedding for now. Adam then turned to me and said, Paul, I really am sorry for how my parents acted earlier. I placed a hand on his shoulder and said gently, The only thing that matters is that you and Anna are happy. The rest doesn't mean anything. After that, I decided not to bring up what had happened again. Neither James nor Lauren said anything either. Maybe it was because the venue staff were nearby, or perhaps they were pretending to behave. Either way, they spent the rest of the time smiling and avoiding any more trouble. I didn't realize it then, but this was just the calm before the storm. As the day went on, I sampled the meal options and eventually headed home. Time flew by, and before I knew it, the wedding day had arrived. I couldn't believe the moment was finally here. My little Anna, who used to walk behind me saying, Daddy, had grown up so much. Seeing her in her pure white wedding dress was a sight I would never forget. I didn't think it was appropriate to carry around a large portrait of my late wife, so instead, I brought a small photograph from one of our trips together. It was my way of sharing this special day with her, even if only in spirit. The ceremony was breathtaking, emotional, and almost magical. It's a memory I'll cherish forever. Afterward, we moved to the reception hall. That's when something unexpected happened. What is this seating chart? I muttered, staring at the paper in disbelief. Sure enough, I was labeled as useless middle school graduate dad. I could hear murmurs spreading across the room as guests noticed the insult on the seating chart. The staff hurriedly rushed to collect the charts, their faces pale as they bowed repeatedly, apologizing over and over. Anna and Adam were backstage, changing into their second outfits, so they hadn't seen any of this yet. From the panic on the staff's faces and the nature of the insult, I had no doubt about who was behind it. Well, how about that? My little surprise for you, said a cold, mocking voice behind me. I turned to see James standing there with a smug grin on his face. Beside him, Lauren hid her expression behind a folding fan, but her posture and the slight shake of her shoulders told me she was laughing at me. My body trembled slightly, but not with anger for myself. It was for Anna. This wasn't about me. I had lived long enough to shrug off insults like these. But for the father of the bride to be humiliated in front of so many guests would spark rumors that could hurt Anna deeply. I had tried to avoid making a scene all day, but this childish stunt had pushed me to my limit. Calmly, I said, at 63 years old, you still find time to pull something this immature? How pathetic. James's grin widened. I'm a man who graduated from a prestigious university, climbed the ranks to become a government official, and raised a son who works for a top company. And you? You gave up on school, locked yourself away, didn't even take the high school entrance exams, and stayed nothing more than a middle school graduate. This is a celebration for the elite. You should leave immediately. His voice was loud and filled with venom, echoing across the room. Curious guests began to gather, drawn by the commotion. I was about to respond, concerned about how this public embarrassment might affect Anna, but before I could, a calm, firm voice rang out. Dad, let's go home. The voice was deeper than usual, but I knew it immediately. It was Anna. I turned to see her standing there, no longer in her wedding gown but back in her casual clothes. Her face was emotionless, as if all feeling had been drained. The staff, who had just finished collecting the seating charts, stood frozen, trembling as they watched her. Anna had clearly heard everything. Adam joined her a moment later, also out of his tuxedo and back in regular clothes. His voice was steady but carried an undercurrent of anger that sent chills through me. Paul, let's go. Meanwhile, James and Lauren's faces twisted in fury. What's the meaning of this? James shouted. Adam, Anna, the reception is about to start. Why are you doing this? Adam stepped forward, his 6 feet 4 inches frame towering over his much shorter mother. Lauren flinched and let out a small yelp as she took a step back. Mom, Adam said, his voice cold and sharp, aren't you ashamed of what you've done? I understand that you've put all your expectations on me since my brother passed away, but I am not your puppet. I want to live my own life, Adam said firmly. I'll repay the kindness you've shown me, but if you keep acting this way, I'm ready to cut ties with both of you. A heavy silence fell over the room. Guests who had been watching quietly started whispering to each other, too afraid to get involved. James, unable to hold back his anger, shouted, How dare you? Defying your parents is unforgivable. But you and Anna can leave. This wedding is completely off. Nothing had changed. James was still the same person who had once screamed at me in school, demanding I let him have the top spot. I was too tired even to sigh. Ignoring James, I turned to Anna and said, You're right. Let's go home. With James canceling the wedding, there was no way it could continue. Though it inconvenienced the guests, leaving seemed like the best choice. Just as we turned to go, a sudden scream came from behind. I spun around to see Lauren collapsing, her face pale as she crumpled to the floor. Guests began to panic, shouting in confusion. I rushed over immediately. Hey, what are you doing to my wife? James tried to push me back, but I raised my voice for the first time. Do you want her to die right here? James froze, shocked by my words. While he stood there in silence, I quickly called for an ambulance. Adam, still stunned by the sight of his mother on the ground, was frozen, unable to react. People crowded around, asking what was happening, their voices full of panic. Anna pushed her way through and hurried to my side. Dad, she said urgently, she mentioned feeling dizzy earlier. Her steps seemed unsteady, and when she helped me with the veil, her hands were trembling. Hearing this, I knew right away. It had to be a stroke. I carefully tilted Lauren onto her side, raised her head slightly, and spoke to her calmly. She responded faintly, which was a good sign. But until the ambulance arrived, I had to monitor her closely. If her condition worsened, I'd have to perform CPR. Rolling up my sleeves, I focused on keeping her stable. Adam, snapping out of his daze, rushed over. What's going to happen to my mom? She's still conscious, which is a good sign, I said, keeping my voice steady. But with a stroke, immediate treatment is critical. Without it, there could be serious aftereffects, or worse. We'll do everything we can until the ambulance gets here. Adam nodded quickly, trying to stay calm, but James was still panicking. Stay away from her. Don't touch her. James shouted, ignoring his relatives who tried to calm him down and explain the situation. He kept calling out Lauren's name, his voice filled with fear. It was clear he couldn't process what was happening. As I watched him, I couldn't help but think back to my own past. I reached into my pocket and touched the photo of my late wife. Looking at her smiling face, I prayed silently, "Please, let me save her this time. Give me the strength to do it." Just then, we heard the staff call out from the entrance. "The ambulance is here." The paramedics rushed in, and we quickly moved to get Lauren the help she needed. "Let's go," I said firmly, as the team worked to stabilize her and prepare her for transport. I slipped the photo of my wife back into my pocket and took a deep breath to steady myself. Hours later, Adam called to let me know that Lauren had survived the surgery. Relief washed over me. Even though the wedding had to be canceled, knowing Lauren was okay made it all worthwhile. After Lauren was taken to the hospital, Anna and I stayed behind to handle the return of wedding gifts and explain the situation to the guests. By the time we finished, exhaustion hit me, and I felt my knees weaken. Anna quickly supported me. "You did great, Dad," she said with a warm smile. "I'm so glad she made it through." "Yeah," I said, letting out a sigh. "But it's not over yet. There's still a lot to do." Anna nodded slowly, and we started walking down the moonlit street toward the hospital where Lauren had been admitted. Visiting hours ended at 9 p.m., so we only had about 45 minutes to see her. We hurried and arrived just as Lauren was waking up. She lay there, staring blankly at the ceiling while James sat at her bedside, clutching her hand and sobbing uncontrollably. Adam saw us at the door and gestured for us to come in. "Thanks for coming, Dad." "Come on," Adam said softly. His words seemed to nudge James, who shifted uncomfortably, opening and closing his mouth as though trying to speak but not finding the right words. I sighed and decided to address it head-on. "Look," I said plainly, "I didn't save Lauren because you told me to. I don't need any half-hearted thanks." James looked down, clearly embarrassed. After a moment of silence, Lauren whispered something in a hoarse voice. "Olivia?" Adam leaned in gently. "Mom, don't push yourself. Just rest for now. We'll talk again later." His calm, reassuring tone seemed to help, and Lauren soon drifted back to sleep. "Dad, just wait here for a bit," Adam said as he and Anna left to grab some takeout for dinner. That left me alone with James. The silence between us was heavy and awkward, but to my surprise, James spoke first. "When Lauren collapsed, I was completely useless," he admitted quietly. "You and Anna stayed so calm. Have you worked in medicine before?" I realized James still believed I had only a middle school education. He was probably shocked by how I had handled the situation. It was time to explain. "No," I began, "I'm not just a middle school graduate. I was delayed for a few years, but I passed my GED, went on to college, and eventually became a doctor." James blinked, stunned. "A doctor?" he asked, almost disbelieving. I nodded, recalling how James once mentioned wanting to be a doctor too. I had assumed he'd pursue that path given his ambition, but clearly, that hadn't happened. "Being a high-ranking bureaucrat is impressive," I said, "but it doesn't seem like you chose it because you loved it." James sighed heavily, his usual arrogance replaced by something closer to regret. "In my family, becoming a bureaucrat was a tradition, passed down for generations. The pressure was enormous, and my father constantly criticized me for never being able to take the top spot in school," he admitted. "That's why you were so obsessed with being number one?" I asked. James nodded slowly. "Yes. But I realized something back then. What's the point of being number one if it only happens because someone else holds back?" He paused and looked away, as if struggling with the memory. "When you didn't transfer to a prestigious high school, even though your grades could have gotten you in?" I understood. I stayed quiet, letting his words sink in. For the first time, James wasn't the arrogant rival I remembered but a man weighed down by expectations he never asked for. I felt a wave of relief as James continued. "Thanks to that, I became the top student at my new school, did well in university, and eventually became a bureaucrat. But no matter how far I climbed, I always felt empty inside, because he wasn't there." "You mean Tyler?" I asked gently. James's eyes widened in shock at the mention of his late son's name. He froze, staring at me as if searching for answers. Slowly, I pulled the photo of my wife from my pocket and showed it to him. In the picture were my wife, Olivia, and myself. "How do you know Tyler?" James stammered. Tyler and I worked closely together in a medical aid organization, I said. My wife, Olivia, was a nurse, and Tyler had incredible knowledge of medicine. Together, we saved countless lives. My voice faltered as memories of those days filled me with both warmth and pain. I'll never forget that day. You should be proud of Tyler's final moments. As a member of the medical team, he carried out his duty with incredible bravery. Olivia and I did everything we could to help him, but in the end, Tyler insisted that the resources we had be used for the children in need, not himself. James's face crumpled, and tears welled in his eyes as I continued. Tyler was a truly kind soul. He never spoke much about his family, so I didn't know his story. I think it's time you have this. I reached into my wallet and pulled out a small piece of paper. This is a note Tyler left behind, I said, handing it to James. James took the note with trembling hands. As he read it, sobs escaped him, and he collapsed to the ground. Tyler, he wasn't really my son, James managed to say through his tears. I married Lauren when Tyler was 14. He wasn't my biological son, but I loved him like he was my own. And now he's gone. Tyler? James fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face, forming a puddle on the asphalt under the clear night sky. At that moment, Anna and Adam returned, rushing over, alarmed by the sight of James sobbing uncontrollably. But James was too consumed by his grief to explain. A few days later, after Lauren regained enough strength to speak, I visited her in the hospital. Though she was still bedridden, the quick treatment meant she wouldn't suffer any lasting damage. With proper rehabilitation, she would eventually return to her normal life. When Lauren saw me enter the room, her gaze fell on the photo in my hand. That photo, it's of Olivia, isn't it? She asked softly. I nodded. You know my wife? Lauren closed her eyes for a moment, her expression thoughtful. Then, to my surprise, she said, yes. When I was 20, I studied abroad in Switzerland to train as a nurse. That's when I met Olivia. She was only 14 at the time, but we bonded over our shared admiration for Catherine Deneuve. Her voice carried a mix of nostalgia and warmth as she recounted the unexpected connection. It was as if, in that moment, a piece of the past we hadn't known was revealed, tying everything together. I had Tyler when I was 22, Lauren began softly, and I had to give up my dream of becoming a nurse. But Olivia, she must have become an amazing nurse, didn't she? I nodded. She did. Olivia was called the modern-day Nightingale by those in the field. People referred to her as the saint with the lamp. By the time I met her, she was 36, and her skills as a nurse were extraordinary. We worked together, got married, and alongside Tyler, we saved countless lives. I paused, remembering the painful moment. When Tyler collapsed during a mission from a stroke, I lost control. I acted far from what's expected of a doctor. But even then, Olivia stayed calm. And Tyler, even as his strength faded, thought only of others. He insisted on prioritizing the children who needed resources, not himself. I reached into my pocket, my voice steady. Tyler made me promise that if I ever returned to the States and met his parents, I would deliver a message. He said that while his life might end there, he wanted you and James to live long lives. He especially wanted you to take care of your health, knowing the family history of strokes. Lauren listened quietly, her expression filled with both grief and understanding. James told me what happened to Tyler, she said, her voice strained but steady. After we lost him, both James and I became so focused on Adam. We wanted him to have a happy, normal life, but, in our pride and stubbornness, we ended up hurting Anna and you. She paused, tears forming in her eyes. It wasn't until I saw the look on Adam's face that I realized how wrong we were. Apologizing won't fix everything, but please, let me say it. I'm sorry. And, thank you for saving me. She extended her hand for a handshake, her sincerity clear. There was no hesitation in her gesture, and I saw no reason to refuse. I shook her hand firmly. As a doctor, I did what I was supposed to do. You don't need to thank me for that, I said gently. But please, when Anna visits, apologize to her. That's all I ask. Lauren nodded, tears streaming down her face as she looked me in the eye. For several heartfelt moments, the silence spoke more than words could. Later, both families sat together and reconciled. While I knew I might never fully forgive James and Lauren for their actions, their acknowledgement of their mistakes was enough for me. What mattered most was that Anna was happy. A few weeks later, Anna gently rubbed her slightly rounded belly and smiled. "Oh, Dad, the baby just moved," she said softly. Adam stood beside her, wrapping his arms around both Anna and their unborn child in a protective embrace. Watching that simple, everyday moment, I realized this was true happiness, the kind I had always wished for my daughter. I had always wished for Olivia to be here too. She would have cared about nothing more than Anna's happiness. One day, I received an unexpected call from James. "I'd like you to come and pay your respects at Tyler's grave," he said. Without a second thought, I agreed and made my way there. The cemetery was peaceful, with sunlight filtering gently through the trees. The well-kept plants swayed in the breeze, creating a calm, almost serene atmosphere. It was easy to momentarily forget we were in a place of loss. When we reached Tyler's grave, I noticed a small laminated note placed there. It read, "I'm doing just fine." Just that one simple sentence, but it carried so much meaning. I imagine Tyler had left it hoping to reassure his parents back home. Though his life had been tragically cut short before he could fully achieve his mission, the note perfectly captured his bright, cheerful, and carefree spirit. "Welcome home, Tyler," James said softly. As he spoke, a gentle breeze passed through, carrying his words upward. Somehow, I felt sure they had reached Tyler. Above us, the clear, cloudless sky reflected a sense of peace, a reflection of Tyler's kind and untroubled heart.
My name is Olivia. I married Ethan when I was young and full of dreams. We were high school sweethearts, and I believed we'd be happy forever. My father, a successful businessman who owned a furniture factory, gave us a beautiful house as a wedding gift. For years after we got married, our son George was born. As time went on, I dedicated myself to being the perfect wife and mother. I kept our home spotless, cooked delicious meals, and made sure George had everything he needed. Meanwhile, Ethan worked as a sales manager, but his career wasn't going as well as he had hoped. One night, he came home angry and frustrated. "I can't do this anymore, Olivia," he yelled, slamming his fist on the kitchen table. The loud noise startled me. I'm working so hard, but it feels like I'm getting nowhere. I tried to stay calm. "What do you want me to do about it?" I asked. His face brightened suddenly. "Your dad. He could give me a job at his factory, something senior. Can't you talk to him for me?" I hesitated. My father was always fair in his business dealings, and I didn't want to ask for special treatment. But when I saw the desperate look in Ethan's eyes, I nodded. "Okay, I'll ask him." The next day, I visited my father at his office. I felt nervous as I spoke. "Dad, I need to ask you something. It's about Ethan. He's really unhappy at his job, and I was wondering if you might have a position for him at the factory." My father thought for a moment before nodding. "All right, I'll give him a chance. But he'll have to prove himself, just like everyone else." When I told Ethan the news, he was thrilled. He picked me up and spun me around in the kitchen. "You're amazing, Olivia. This is going to change everything for us." And for a while it did. Ethan started earning more, and our financial struggles eased. But as one problem went away, a new one began. My relationship with Ethan's mother, Judith. Judith was very protective of her son, and never really liked me. She often came over uninvited, criticized how I ran the house, and demanded my attention constantly. One afternoon, as I was trying to prepare dinner, Judith barged through the front door. "Olivia," she said sharply. "I need you to take me shopping right now," Judith said. I clenched my teeth. "Judith, I'm in the middle of cooking. Can it wait until tomorrow?" Her eyes narrowed. "Are you saying my needs aren't important? After all I've done for this family?" I swallowed my frustration, knowing arguing would only make things worse. "Of course not. Just give me a few minutes to finish here." Later, as I drove Judith to the mall, she complained about everything, my driving, my cooking, and even the way I parked. I couldn't help but wonder how my life had turned into this. I used to be smart and independent, but now it felt like all I did was cater to everyone else while my own dreams faded away. One especially bad afternoon, Judith stormed into the house without knocking, as always. "Olivia," she shouted, her voice already grating on my nerves. "I'm hungry. Make me something to eat." Biting back a sharp reply, I set aside the laundry and dragged myself to the kitchen. As I cooked, Judith sat at the table, criticizing everything I did. "You're using too much oil," she snapped. "And cut those vegetables smaller. Don't you know how to cook properly?" When I finally placed the food in front of her, I hoped she would eat quickly and leave. Instead, to my shock, she packed up all the food I'd made and stood up. "I'll be taking this with me," she announced. "I have bridge club tonight, and this will be perfect for snacks." I stared at her in disbelief. "But, Judith, that was supposed to be our dinner." "Oh, you can always make more," she said, already heading for the door. "It's not like you have anything better to do with your time." As the door slammed shut, I sank into a chair, feeling completely defeated. I glanced at the clock. I now had less than an hour to make another meal before Ethan came home from work. When Ethan walked in, loosening his tie, he found me frantically cooking. "What's going on?" he asked. "Why isn't dinner ready?" I told Ethan what had happened with his mom, hoping he would understand or at least support me. Instead, his expression turned dark. "Mom was here, and you didn't make her feel welcome?" he demanded. "Olivia, you know how important family is to me. You should have been more accommodating." "Accommodating?" I repeated, shocked. "Ethan, she took our dinner and treats me like a servant in my own house." Ethan shook his head, clearly annoyed. "You're exaggerating. Mom just wants to feel loved and appreciated." "Is that really too much to ask?" We ate the quickly thrown-together meal in silence. Sitting across from Ethan, who once was my best friend and high school sweetheart, I felt like I was looking at a stranger. The growing distance between us was impossible to ignore. One evening, Ethan came home from work in a terrible mood. His face was red with anger as he slammed the door shut. "Olivia," he shouted, "your father is a tyrant, a bully. He humiliates people and uses them like pawns in his little games." I froze, shocked by his words. My father had always been kind and fair as far as I knew. "What happened?" I asked carefully. Ethan's eyes burned with fury. "I stood up for an employee today. Your father was treating him unfairly, and I couldn't just sit there and watch. Do you know what your precious daddy did? He fired me. Right there, on the spot." My head spun. This didn't sound like my father at all. "There must be some misunderstanding," I said. "Let me talk to Dad and hear his side of the story." "No," Ethan yelled, making me flinch. "You will not speak to your father. You will not speak to your mother. As far as we're concerned, they don't exist anymore. Do you understand?" I trembled, too shocked and scared to argue. "Okay," I whispered. In the days that followed, Ethan found another job and started earning well again, but something between us had changed. The love and warmth I used to feel for him had been replaced by fear and resentment. As the years went by, our son George grew up. He often asked about his grandparents, but Ethan would shut down the conversation every time. "You have one grandmother," he would say firmly. "My mother. That's all you need to know." When George got ready to leave for college in another city, I felt a mix of pride and sadness. My baby was growing up, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing the only ally I had in the house. Over the next few years, my life fell into a dull routine. Every day felt the same, and the dreams I once had seemed like a distant memory. I did everything Ethan asked and put up with Judith's constant criticism. Without George around, their treatment of me became even worse. One afternoon, while I was scrubbing the kitchen floor under Judith's watchful eye, the phone rang. I reached for it, but Judith snatched it away. "I'll answer it," she snapped. "You focus on cleaning that floor. I can still see spots." I clenched my teeth and went back to scrubbing, but I couldn't help overhearing her side of the conversation. "Yes, this is Olivia's residence," Judith said, her tone dripping with disdain. "Who? Her father? I'm sorry, but Olivia isn't available to speak with you. Please don't call again." I froze and looked up. Wait. I called out, but Judith had already hung up the phone. That was your father, she said coldly. I told him not to contact you again. You should be thanking me for protecting this family from those toxic people. Anger surged through me. You had no right to do that, I said, my voice shaking. He's my father. I should have been allowed to speak to him. Judith's eyes narrowed. You ungrateful little. Before she could finish, Ethan walked in. What's going on here? He demanded. Judith immediately put on a hurt expression. Oh, Ethan, she said, her voice trembling. Your wife is being so disrespectful to me after everything I do for this family. Ethan turned to me, his face dark with anger. Is this true, Olivia? Are you disrespecting my mother? I opened my mouth to explain, but the words wouldn't come. I realized with a sinking heart that it didn't matter what I said. Ethan would always take Judith's side. A year passed after that phone call from my father. My life continued in the same suffocating routine, with Ethan and Judith tightening their control over me. Then, on a cool autumn morning, everything changed. The phone rang while I was making breakfast. Ethan was in the shower, and Judith hadn't arrived for her daily inspection of my housekeeping. For once, I was able to answer the call without anyone interfering. Hello, I said hesitantly. Olivia? Is that you? The voice on the other end was familiar but distant. It was my father. Olivia, it's your mother. She's very ill. The doctors don't think she has much time left. She needs you. We both do. I felt a wave of emotions, sadness, guilt, and longing. Just then, I heard the bathroom door open. Ethan would be downstairs any minute. I'll try, Dad, I whispered. I promise I'll try. Then I quickly hung up the phone. When Ethan came into the kitchen, I was trying to stay calm. Who is that on the phone? He asked, his voice suspicious. I took a deep breath. It was my father, I said quietly. My mother is very sick, Ethan. She's dying. I need to go see her. Ethan's face hardened. Absolutely not. We've been through this, Olivia. Your parents don't exist for us anymore. Something inside me broke. For the first time in years, I stood up to Ethan. I'm going, I said firmly, with or without your permission. She's my mother, and I won't let her die without saying goodbye. Ethan's jaw tightened, his anger barely contained.
Fine.
One day. That's all you get. Then you come back home where you belong. I nodded, too afraid to say more. One day was better than nothing. My hands trembled as I picked up the phone and called my son, George. When I told him what was happening, he surprised me by immediately offering to go with me. Relief washed over me. The next morning, George and I drove to my childhood home. When we arrived, my father greeted us at the door. He looked much older than I remembered, his face lined with grief. Without a word, he pulled me into a tight hug. He led us to my mother's room. She was lying in bed, pale and weak, but her eyes lit up the moment she saw me. Olivia, she whispered, her voice shaky as she reached out a trembling hand. My baby girl. I rushed her side and held her hand tightly. Mom, I'm here.
I'm so sorry.
Can you forgive me? She gave me a soft smile. There's nothing to forgive, sweetheart. I'm just glad you're here now. We spent the whole day by her side, sharing memories and trying to make up for the years we'd lost. As the sun began to set, her breathing grew shallow. She squeezed my hand and looked into my eyes. Olivia, she said softly, promise me something. Promise me you'll live your life. Really live it. Don't let anyone cage your spirit again. Tears streamed down my face as I nodded. I promise, Mom. I promise. She smiled one last time, then closed her eyes. Her hand went limp in mine. She was gone. Suddenly, my phone started ringing nonstop. I didn't need to look to know it was Ethan. I stepped into the hallway to answer, my heart heavy. Where the hell are you, Olivia? Ethan's angry voice barked through the phone. You were supposed to be back hours ago. Ethan, I began, struggling to keep my voice steady. I can't leave yet. My mom just passed away. I need to stay for the funeral. Absolutely not, he roared. I told you one day, and that's all you get. If you're not back by tomorrow, don't bother coming back at all. His words were both a threat and a promise. For a moment, I felt the urge to give in, to rush back to the life I knew. But then I thought of my mother's final words, urging me to truly live my life. Fine, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I'm staying. Before he could respond, I ended the call, my heart pounding. For the first time in our marriage, I had defied Ethan. It was both terrifying and freeing. The next few days passed in a blur as we grieved and prepared for my mother's funeral. On the day of the funeral, we stood quietly around my mother's grave. My phone started ringing again. Ethan's name lit up on the screen. Without thinking, I hit the speaker button, planning to silence it quickly. Ethan's loud, angry voice echoed for everyone to hear. Olivia, this is your last chance. If you don't come home right now, I swear I'll come and drag you back myself. You ungrateful piece of trash, after everything I've done for you. Embarrassed and furious, I quickly ended the call. My face burned with shame, and I could feel the stunned eyes of everyone around me. George looked furious, his jaw clenched tightly, and my father's expression was filled with concern. After the service ended, my father gently pulled me aside. Olivia, he said softly, we need to talk. We walked to a quiet corner of the cemetery. My father took a deep breath, his face serious. Sweetheart, there's something I should have told you years ago. Something about Ethan. I stood frozen as my father revealed the truth about why Ethan had really left the company. It wasn't because he had stood up for an employee. My father had caught him stealing money, taking funds from the company and its clients by manipulating prices and pocketing the extra cash. I fired him to protect the business and our clients, my father explained, his voice heavy. I didn't tell you at the time because I thought you loved him. I didn't want to come between you. But now, hearing how he treats you and seeing the life you're living, I can't stay silent anymore. It felt like the ground beneath me had disappeared. For years, I had believed Ethan's lies. I had let him cut me off from my family and endured his and Judith's emotional abuse, all based on a lie. There's more, my father continued, his tone even more serious. I recently heard from a friend that Ethan's current company is under investigation. There are financial discrepancies, Olivia. I think he's doing the same thing again. As the weight of his words hit me, I felt a strange mix of despair and relief. The life I thought I knew was falling apart, but at the same time, I felt like I was finally waking up. From the ruins of everything I had believed, something new, something stronger, was beginning to take shape. The day after the funeral, I saw a chance to start fresh. My father, George, and I decided to go back to my house. To our surprise, we found the place bustling with activity. Judith's friends were everywhere, and the smell of food wafted from the open windows. When we walked in, it was clear there was a full-blown party in progress. Judith, holding a glass of wine, spotted us first. Her eyes narrowed as she looked at my father and George. Well, look who finally decided to show up, she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. You're late, Olivia. My birthday celebration started hours ago. I froze, stunned. In the chaos of the past few days, I had completely forgotten about Judith's birthday. Before I could say anything, she shoved a dirty rag into my hands. Don't just stand there, she snapped. Start cleaning up. These tables won't wipe themselves. My father, who had been silently watching, suddenly spoke up, his voice booming. How dare you speak to my daughter like that, he thundered, silencing the room. She's not some servant to follow your orders. She's a grown woman, and she deserves respect. Judith let out a sharp laugh. Respect, she sneered. She gave up any right to respect when she married my son. Her family is Ethan and me now. You're nothing to her anymore. I stood there, shocked, as my father and Judith argued. Their voices grew louder, and the guests began shifting uncomfortably, unsure whether to stay or leave. Suddenly, Ethan stormed into the room. What the hell is going on here? He demanded, his eyes locking onto me. Olivia, why aren't you serving the guests? And what are they doing here? He pointed angrily at my father and George. Something inside me broke. Years of frustration and anger came pouring out. "No, Ethan," I said, my voice strong and steady. "I'm not serving anyone. I'm not cleaning up. And I'm done staying silent." The room fell completely silent. Even Judith seemed caught off guard. "I know the truth, Ethan," I continued, pulling out the divorce papers I had hastily prepared. "I know why you really left my father's company. And I'm done. I want a divorce." For a moment, Ethan looked like he might explode, or even lunge at me. But then, realizing he was outnumbered, he seemed to deflate. "Fine," he snarled. "Take your divorce. But don't think you'll get a penny from me." I couldn't help but laugh. "This house is mine, Ethan. My father gave it to us as a wedding gift, remember? You're the one who needs to leave." Ethan and Judith glared at us, but left shortly after, slamming the door behind them. As the house grew quiet, I sank onto the couch, suddenly feeling drained. George, who had been quietly watching everything unfold, finally spoke. "Mom, why didn't you tell me things were this bad?" I sighed, guilt weighing on me. "I'm sorry, George. I thought I was protecting you, but now I see I was teaching you the wrong lessons about love and respect." In the weeks that followed, my life changed completely. I started the divorce process and focused on rebuilding my life. True to his word, my father stood by me every step of the way. One afternoon, as we sat in his study discussing plans for the future, he brought up something unexpected. "Olivia," he said gently, his tone serious. "I've been thinking. I'm not getting any younger, and the factory needs fresh ideas. How would you feel about coming to work with me?" I blinked, surprised. "Me? But Dad, I don't know anything about running a business." He chuckled. "Neither did I when I started." "You're smart, Olivia. You can learn. Besides, it's time you had a chance to spread your wings." Over the next few months, I dove headfirst into learning the ropes of the business. My father was a patient teacher, guiding me through everything it took to run the furniture factory. To my surprise, I discovered a passion for design and innovation I never knew I had. Meanwhile, the divorce dragged on, with Ethan fighting me at every turn. He even contested the ownership of the house and tried to turn George against me. But in the end, justice prevailed. I was awarded the house and financial compensation for the years of emotional abuse. Ethan, on the other hand, faced charges for his fraudulent activities. Deep in debt and with his reputation ruined, he could no longer hold senior positions. Judith's influence over my life also faded. The last I heard, she had moved in with a distant relative, her social circle shrinking after the truth about Ethan came to light. 4 years passed quickly, filled with hard work and new beginnings. Then one quiet Thursday morning, my father called me into his office. His face was serious, and as he gestured for me to sit, I felt my heart tighten. "Olivia," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "I'm not well, Olivia," my father said softly. "The doctors, they don't think I have much time left." The world seemed to spin. "No, Dad," I whispered, grabbing his hand. He gave my fingers a gentle squeeze. "It's okay, sweetheart," he said with a sad smile. "I've had a good life. And now I can leave knowing you're strong, that you're free, and that you'll be okay." Tears streamed down my face as he continued. "I'm leaving everything to you, Olivia. The business, the house, all of it. You've proven yourself. I know you'll take good care of everything." In the weeks that followed, we spent as much time together as we could. My father's health worsened quickly, but his spirit stayed strong. He passed away peacefully in his sleep, leaving behind a legacy that was now my responsibility to carry forward. News of his passing and my inheritance spread quickly through our small town. I was still adjusting to my new reality when, one crisp autumn afternoon, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I froze. Standing there was Ethan, holding a bouquet of flowers and wearing an apologetic expression. "Olivia," he said, his voice softer than I'd heard it in years. "I'm so sorry about your father. May I come in?" Warily, I stepped aside and let him in. We stood in the foyer, an awkward silence hanging between us. Finally, Ethan spoke. "I've been thinking a lot, Olivia. About us, about our life together. I know I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I've changed. My mother passed away last month. She was the one who always came between us. Now there's nothing stopping us from being happy together again. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could say anything, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Moments later, the front door opened, and a tall, distinguished-looking man walked in. "Olivia, darling, I'm home," he called out. Then he stopped, his gaze falling on Ethan. Ethan looked between us, confusion and anger spreading across his face. "Who the hell is this?" he demanded. The man stepped forward, extending his hand to Ethan. "I'm Richard, Olivia's husband. And you are?" Ethan ignored the outstretched hand, his face twisting with rage. "Husband? What the hell, Olivia? You got remarried? You traitor." Richard's expression hardened. He stepped between Ethan and me, his voice calm but firm. "I suggest you leave."
Now.
"I suggest you leave now, and never talk to my wife like that again," Richard said, his voice calm but firm. Ethan lunged forward, but Richard was faster. He grabbed Ethan's arm and firmly escorted him to the door. "This is your only warning," Richard said steadily. "Stay away from Olivia. If you ever come near her or disrespect her again, you'll regret it." With that, Richard shut the door as the sound of screeching tires faded into the distance. He turned to me, his expression soft with concern. "Are you okay, love?" I nodded and stepped into his arms. "I'm fine. I'm just glad you're home." I looked up at him, a small smile on my lips. "And I'm glad you waited for me all these years." Richard chuckled, pressing a gentle kiss to my forehead. "I've loved you since high school, Olivia. I would have waited forever if I had to." As we stood there in each other's arms, I couldn't help but reflect on how life had come full circle. Richard and I had been high school sweethearts before Ethan entered my life. After my divorce, Richard and I reconnected, and the feelings we once had grew into something even stronger. 7 months ago, we married in a quiet ceremony, starting a new and hopeful chapter together. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from George. "Mom, great news. Teresa's pregnant. You're going to be a grandmother." In the months that followed, life settled into a peaceful and joyful rhythm. George and his wife, Teresa, moved back to our city to be close to family as they prepared for their baby's arrival. They even joined us at the factory, bringing fresh ideas and enthusiasm to the business. It felt like a new beginning, filled with love, family, and the happiness I had waited so long to find.